Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Baiju's exam prep. Welcome to the doubt session on international relations. So last week we have completed our syllabus for international relations. Now let's take a look at all the doubts and questions that you guys have asked. So I'll start with the questions that have been sent before, and based on the time, I'll take up questions from the comment section as well. We'll also look at some PYQs in between. I'll take you through some previous questions. We'll try to discuss how you can approach answer writing, especially for your mains exam. So let's look at the first question. In recent times, Jyoti Chaudhary is asking this question. In recent times, the deterioration of India Canada relations has been a highlight in the news. Kindly explain the recent developments, specifically about the maximum number of diplomats allowed to be stationed in another country and the rule that talks about it. So that Canada is claiming India, which has been violated. Also, do we need to learn more on the history of India Canada relations? All right. So, Jyoti Chaudhary is referring to the recent tensions that have come up in the India Canada relations. I'm sure all of you would have heard about it, read about these developments. India Canada relations have taken a very big hit, primarily because of the Khalistan movement. We did mention that attempts are being made to revive the Khalistan movement, right? So, this is something we'll study in greater detail under internal security. In the subject of internal security, we'll study Khalistan movement in complete detail, including the background. We'll understand what contributed to the rise of the movement, what happened in the 1970s and 80s, and how come Canada has become a base for several Khalistani terrorists who are operating against India. Now, this is not something new. This is something we have faced in the past as well. In 1980s, Canada and many other countries, they had hosted several Khalistani extremists. Not that their governments were directly supporting them, but in a way they were sheltering them. They were allowing to conduct their activities. And despite India appealing to them, they wouldn't cooperate with India, especially during the Cold War period. As we were not aligned with Western countries, we were aligned with the Soviet Union. Western countries in general, they wouldn't bother much about India's security concerns. Eventually, Canada did cooperate with India after a deadly terror incident after the Air Kanishka bombing. Air Kanishka was a Air India flight coming from Canada to India. This aircraft was bombed by Khalistani terrorists by Babar Khalsa International. All the 300 plus passengers and crew were killed, making it the biggest terror attack of that time. It was the biggest ever incident of that kind involving an aircraft, involving a civilian aircraft. So it was only after this terror incident that Canada cooperated with India to an extent, and we have definitely, played a big role in bringing down the movement. By 1990s, India managed to almost wipe out the movement. So this was a collective effort. In Punjab, there was a lot of domestic action that was taken under ASPA provisions, where Punjab police they decimated the Khalistani outfits. Border security also improved, which curbed the support coming in from Pakistan, and our covert operations against these outfits was stepped up. Both IB and RAW, they ran a series of covert operations in the 80s targeting these outfits and the Pakistani support that was being given to these outfits. Plus, we finally got some support from foreign governments as well, which helped us in curbing this movement. But the fact that Canada has, in a way, hosted these groups has always been a concern for us. There are many convicted Khalistani terrorists. They have run away from India, they have hidden in Canada, and Canada has sheltered them. And of late, since 2015, this has again become a major issue because we have clearly seen an attempt to revive the movement. This is going on from 2010 at least, from the last 13 years. A deliberate, planned attempt is going on around the world and in India as well to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. And several older Khalistani terrorists, right, who are based out of Canada and some other countries, they have reactivated themselves and they have instigated the movement again. So again, India suspects Pakistan's involvement. But it's Canada's role which has really become problematic for India. Under Justin Trudeau, there are several Khalistani extremists who have been flourishing in Canada, and Canada is not acting against them. And this time, it's not that India and Western countries don't get along. Things are very different today, right? India and Western countries are strategic allies, and yet Canada has refused to cooperate with India. It has refused to act against these groups. A few years ago, in 2018, Justin Trudeau was visiting India, and as part of the Prime Minister's delegation, he brought along an individual known as Jaspal Atwal. Jaspal Atwal was a Canadian businessman who had become very influential. But back in the 1980s, he was a Khalistani terrorist. He was involved in the assassination attempt of a minister in the Punjab government. He has been convicted in this case. But before his arrest, he ran away from India, took shelter in Canada, and there he became a successful businessman. Now, this convicted terrorist was being brought along by the Canadian Prime Minister as part of his official delegation. Now, this was obviously unacceptable to India. This was a grave act of provocation. Bringing a convicted terrorist as part of official PM's delegation is great offense to India. So back then, our ties had already taken a hit. The Indian government had scaled down the visit itself. The whole delegation, headed by Justin Trudeau, was not given the kind of respect or treatment that should have been given otherwise to a official diplomatic delegation. India scaled down the visit itself, causing a lot of embarrassment for Canada. So since few years, this tension has persisted in the relationship, right? And now, especially from last year, 2022 to 2023, a lot of developments have taken place. In India itself, a group known as Waris Punjab De, headed by Amritpal Singh, tried reviving Khalistani activities quite openly. It engaged in blatant acts of extremism, attacking police stations, giving a call for Khalistani separatism, right? So India crushed the outfit, arrested most of the members, including Amritpal Singh. This led to complete chaos in Punjab for almost a month. There was heightened security, internet was suspended, prohibitory orders were imposed under Section 144. So it was a very tense period in Punjab just a few months ago. So, following these incidents here in India, there was a retaliation in Western countries. In several Western countries, we saw a retaliation. Few members of the Sikh diaspora who had been radicalized, now they were getting support from some of the younger Sikh diaspora as well, who had been largely radicalized on the internet, on social media. So, in several countries, from UK to Canada to US to Australia, right? Even Italy, Germany, France, Belgium, in Thailand and Philippines, in UAE, in multiple countries, some of the radical elements of the diaspora started triggering the Khalistan movement again, right? There were protests in front of Indian missions abroad. The Indian High Commission in London was targeted by Khalistani extremists. They even brought down the Indian flag and injured an Indian diplomat. Similar clashes broke out in many other countries, and the Indian consulate in San Francisco was attacked. Indian consulates and high commissions in Australia, right, in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, they were all attacked by Khalistani extremists, leading to heightened tensions. But all these governments, they acted against them. US, UK, Australia, they're very cooperative this time because we share very close strategic ties with them. So these governments have extended full support to India to crack down on these Khalistani extremists. But Canada has turned the other way. It has not only sheltered these outfits and these elements, it has allowed them to freely conduct anti India activities on their soil. The sacred Gurudwaras are being misused by these terrorists, and Canada has allowed it to happen. Even when India provides them sufficient intelligence and evidence, the Canadian authorities don't act against them. The other problem is that few Khalistani terrorists like Hardeep Singh Nijjar, India has designated him as a terrorist under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So terrorists like Niger were allowed to freely operate in Canada, even conduct rallies and deliver hate speech against India. A few months ago, there was a rally in Canada where some of these Khalistani extremists they depicted Prime Minister Indira Gandhi being assassinated by the Khalistani extremists. Now, these are grave acts of provocation, right? And Canada didn't act against them. Not a single person was arrested. So, following this, India protested against Canadian inaction. We raised it as a diplomatic issue. And we also noticed that Indian diplomats abroad were facing a lot of risk. Threats were being issued by extremists to target Indian diplomats. So, India's concerns were increasing. And around the same time, few Khalistani terrorists ended up dead in Pakistan, in UK, and in Canada in almost back-to-back events in near Rawalpindi and near Lahore. Right, a couple of Khalistani terrorists they were shot down in UK. A Khalistani terrorist involved in targeting the Indian High Commission who brought down the flag. He died primarily due to his health condition. He was already suffering from cancer. It's a well-established fact. And Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the chief of Khalistan Tiger Force, which is a designated terrorist organization, he was shot dead in Canada. Now, all of a sudden, Canada blamed this on India. Right? After the G20 summit, the Canadian Prime Minister went public. In the Canadian Parliament, he said that Indian agencies, that is RAW essentially, had carried out the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil, which is a breach of their sovereignty, a breach of their law. Prior to that, during the G20 summit itself, Trudeau had brought up this issue with Prime Minister Modi, pointing out that India had carried out the assassination. So immediately, India denied all these allegations. India has categorically denied we are not involved in the policy of assassinations, and we asked for evidence. But Canada has said it has evidence, but it can't share that in the public domain. Apparently, Canada has received the intelligence from Five Eyes Alliance, which is an intelligence grouping of five Western democracies: US, Canada, then UK, Australia, New Zealand. These five Western democracies are part of the Five Eyes Alliance. According to reports, most likely it is US which passed on the evidence to show that Indian agents were apparently involved in the assassination of Nijjar. Since it involves intelligence operations, Canada, of course, can't reveal that in the public domain. But without evidence, India has denied its involvement. And following this, there has been a complete collapse in our relations. Usually, friendly countries don't do this, right? In the case of Canada, especially, right? A friendly country shouldn't have allowed things to go to this level. Ideally, it should have collaborated with India, worked with India to bring down these terrorists, arrest them, punish them according to law, or extradite them to India, right? But instead of that, now following these mysterious deaths that happened, it's being put on India without substantial proof being given in the public domain. So this is what leads to the diplomatic standoff, and India's position is that Canadian diplomats are involved in several activities in India, meaning we are pointing fingers at Canadian intelligence, saying Canadian intelligence officers in India, they are probably having contacts with Khalistani extremists. So this has escalated the standoff, and our ties have been completely downgraded. We have stopped issuing visas to Canadians. Canada also has done almost the same by, scaling down its diplomatic presence. Canada suspended the FTA talks as well. A free trade agreement was being negotiated, but these FTA talks has been suspended by Canada. All right. India has scaled down the ties with Canada, and we also asked Canada to withdraw around 41 diplomats. We said there is no parity between the number of diplomats we have sent to each other's country. All right. Apparently, Canada had around close to 70 to 80 diplomats in India, including their High Commission in Delhi. Right. Whereas in Canada, we have hardly around 20 diplomats. India has sent hardly around 20 diplomats. So India said there is no parity, there is a huge mismatch, which does not justify the work that the diplomats are doing. And now India also has said that Canadian diplomats were involved in unnecessary activities, which means it's a finger we are pointing at, saying Canadian intelligence agencies were involved in maybe having contacts with the Khalistani extremists in Punjab or in other parts of India. So now, just a few days back, India ordered Canada to withdraw 41 diplomats to bring parity between the diplomatic officers stationed in both the countries. So Canada has no other choice. It had to withdraw. It has already started the process, and it has stopped all visa services in India except for in Delhi. All the consulates will not process any more visas because of this situation. Now, this is the essential background to those who aren't aware. Now, what Jyoti is asking is that on what provision, on what basis has India asked Canada to withdraw the diplomats? What's the legal basis for that? We have something called the Vienna Convention. The Vienna Convention of 1961 and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 1963. All right. The first convention deals with diplomatic relations, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The second one is the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. These two conventions, collectively called the Vienna Convention, provides for the diplomatic protection that countries are bound to offer. It's legally binding. All the countries have signed and ratified it. If you have to have diplomatic ties with other countries, you have to sign, ratify this, adopt a law where you're obligated to protect the missions of foreign countries. That is, if their embassies, high commissions are present, if their consulates are present, it is our duty to protect them. Now, I'll take the example of India. In our capital, New Delhi, in Chanakyapuri, which is the diplomatic enclave, there are many foreign embassies, high commissions present, right? And across India, in Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, there are many consulates present. Now, it is India's duty under Vienna Convention to protect the sanctity of the missions at any cost. We cannot allow any kind of threat against these missions. These mission territory, where the land that they are sitting on, is as good as foreign territory. Meaning, there is a degree of immunity given to the facilities and to the officials who are working here. We call this diplomatic immunity. These missions and the officials posted here officially, they enjoy diplomatic cover, meaning our laws are, uh, let's say, our police jurisdiction, our taxation jurisdiction will not apply to these missions and the officials stationed here. All right. The diplomatic immunity extends to their residence, their cars or vehicles in which they travel, the baggage that they send and receive. All these are protected under Vienna Convention. It cannot be touched. Indian police cannot enter a foreign embassy or a foreign consulate. Is that clear? A foreign diplomat cannot be arrested unless and until his diplomatic immunity is removed. All right. So, under Vienna Convention, a basic standard has been set so that diplomats can function without fear, without any threat, coercion. Because, especially between hostile countries and even between friendly countries, it can happen where countries might threaten the diplomats of other countries. They might use their police, their laws, their taxation powers to blackmail, to threaten the diplomats and force them to work against the interests of the other country, the host country. Right? So that is why the Vienna Convention is in place. It guarantees diplomatic immunity to the missions and the diplomats, and every country is obligated to ensure this. Just like India is obligated to protect Canadian diplomats and Canadian missions in India, even Canada is obligated to do the same. If, let's say, if a diplomat is involved in activities that threatens our security, right? If India, for example, let's say India feels that a certain diplomat or a certain group of diplomats are not serving our interests, or let's say they are meddling with our internal matters, in such cases we can declare them as non persona grata, meaning we are withdrawing the diplomatic cover, we are withdrawing diplomatic immunity to these diplomats. We will give advance notice, advance warning is given, right? They are given a small window within which they have to leave the country, or else they lose their diplomatic immunity, which means after that we will even have the powers to arrest them if required. We'll give them a notice of 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days. Pack up everything and leave immediately. The government has to recall these diplomats who are declared as non persona grata, meaning they don't enjoy diplomatic immunity anymore. So countries do have the power to withdraw the immunity if the diplomats threaten the security of the nation and if they interfere with the internal matters of the country. All right, this is very common. It keeps happening between US and Russia. This is a very common affair, right? US and China as well, India, Pakistan. It's usually between hostile countries that these things happen, where diplomats of the other country are thrown out. All right. But in the case of Canada, it's a rare occurrence as we were very good friends. But because of Canada's inaction against Khalistani extremists, and now the allegation it has made that India assassinated Niger has escalated these tensions. Now, on what basis are we asking Canada to withdraw the diplomats? It's because under Vienna Convention, there is a provision to maintain parity in the number of diplomats stationed in the country. This is the provision India is relying upon. Vienna Convention says that there's an article which says that two countries have to maintain parity in the number of diplomats. Like if one country has 20 diplomats, another country can't have 100 diplomats. There should be a rough equal number. If let's say one country has 20 diplomats, other can have maybe 24, 25. The number of diplomats stationed, it should justify the work that they are doing. The whole work of the mission, right, should match with the number of diplomats stationed there. With very limited work, they can't have 100, 200 diplomats, right? If the workload is too much, then yes, maybe 40, 50 diplomats can be allowed. And also countries can, come to their own understanding as well. They can sign an agreement saying we will station these many diplomats each. But between India and Canada, there was no parity. As I told you, we had only 20 diplomats across Canada, across the embassy, the high commission, the consulates. Canada had almost 70 to 80. That's a huge mismatch. So India now has ordered 41 of them to be withdrawn because India or else will withdraw the diplomatic immunity. So Canada has withdrawn these diplomats and it has shut down its visa services in India except for in Delhi. So this is what has happened. All right. I gave you a little detailed explanation so that we can get an insight into India Canada relations as well. Anyways, we'll discuss this in internal security from the security point of view, right? But now this is enough. You don't have to go into the background of India Canada relations. This is more than sufficient. So I hope this answers the question. Now let's look at the next question. Russia has shown quite an interest in building relations with China and Pakistan and also is conducting military exercises with Pakistan. So while it is understandable in the context of China, explain Russia's involvement with Pakistan and its impact on India. See, as you know, Russia, China have always been close allies. Despite the small issues they have had, they are very strong allies of each other. So Russia, China have very close strategic relations, and of late they have close defense relations as well. Now, especially when it comes to countering Western countries, Russia, China are always on the same page at platforms like United Nations. Even with regard to most of the global conflicts, Russia, China are on the same page because it's understandable. Both are authoritarian governments, left-wing communist governments, and their common rivalry with the West, the geopolitical tensions they have, leads them to align together in the strategic defense domain. And they do have a lot of joint initiatives They work together as well in countries like Iran, in Syria, and many other countries. Right? So Russia-China relations are obvious. But what explains the close ties between Russia-Pakistan of late? That's a question. Russia-Pakistan have started conducting a military exercise as well. Now, this is quite unprecedented. Russia is considering exports, military exports. It's considering export of weapons to Pakistan. Now, these developments are quite unprecedented, right? Because previously Russia was very, very mindful of India's interests. Even with regard to China, sometimes Russia would not sell the same weapons to both China and Pakistan if it had sold the weapon to India, right? To ensure India has a edge over both Pakistan and China, Russia wouldn't sell the same weapon platforms to China and Pakistan. Especially with Pakistan, Russia had never had good relations or strong ties with the Pakistani state. And also because Pakistan was largely responsible for the Afghan Mujahideen, which defeated the Soviet Union. So that angle was also there. But now geopolitics have changed, the time, the circumstances have changed. As India has gotten closer to Western countries, especially the United States, then our procurement of weapons has gone up from Israel, France, and US. Right? We are procuring more weapons from these Western countries. We have very close strategic ties with them as well. So naturally, Russia is upset about India's growing inclination towards the West. So Russia is trying to counterbalance that by aligning slightly with Pakistan. This is a regular geopolitical move. All right. It of course has an impact. Even we have tried to move away slightly from Russia. We have tried to reduce our military dependency on Russia because most of the Russian military equipment, they have been outdated. The technology is outdated. The cost of servicing, maintaining them has become very expensive. And also, when you rely just on one country for your critical weapons, that might give unnecessary leverage and too much power to another country. Russia has often misused this monopoly on our military, market, the defense market that is there, and it has even jacked up the prices. It has deliberately increased prices, forcing India to buy Russian equipment at much higher cost. So this is something India was worried about. So what we did was we diversified our defense imports. We procured more advanced technology from France, Israel, and US. So this has cut Russia's share in our defense market. So Russia was upset about that. And also the growing strategic inclination between India and Western countries is also something that bothered Russia. So Russia is counterbalancing India and its inclination towards the West by getting closer to Pakistan. That's what explains that shift. So it does concern India, but again, even we have inclined towards the West. So that's how diplomacy works, right? You strike a balance between both sides. And India has done quite well in the case of the Ukraine conflict by backing Russia, by giving all the support, right? At all the UN votes, we have abstained. We have never voted against Russia, criticized Russia for the war, and we have bypassed the sanctions. We have been one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil, right? So in that regard, I think we can balance it out. Shouldn't be much of a concern. But yes, India does feel a little irritated that Russia has gotten closer to Pakistan. That concern is definitely there. Next, recently it has been observed that Russia is under Chinese influence, trying to set up ties with North Korea. Student is asking, Russia is getting closer to North Korea with the help of China. Okay. Rumors include the possibility of nuclear weapons sharing. What does Russia and North Korea gain from this respectively? What should be India's stand on it? Okay. See, first of all, Russia does not need China to intervene to set up ties with North Korea. Russia and North Korea are already close to each other. Understood? Of course, China and North Korea are very close to each other. Russia and North Korea also are very, very close to each other. Now, recently, as a result of the Ukraine war, Russia is facing critical challenges. Its weapon supply has depleted. Is that clear? It has not been able to handle the military logistics. The war has drained the Russian economy, Russian resources. Russia is struggling with shortage of weapons. It is trying to source weapons from wherever possible. For example, from Iran. Iran has supplied a lot of weapons, including its drones and missiles, to aid the Russian war against Ukraine. There are reports that China also has been giving similar support, where weapons are being transferred to Russia. But however, it's not been confirmed, it's not been verified. But there are rumors that China has started supplying weapons as well secretly. Recently, there was a meeting between Putin and Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea. Kim Jong Un was invited to Russia. The two leaders met and they have discussed possible weapons transfer. Apparently, North Korea has promised to supply artillery and battle tanks and other ammunition that is needed. So, this is why Russia North Korea ties are in news. But this is nothing new. All right, Russia and North Korea have been always close to each other. Russia has had very good military strategic ties and financial ties with North Korea. But the question of North Korea giving nuclear weapons to Russia is baseless because Russia already has thousands of nuclear warheads, thousands. It doesn't need any support from North Korea in that regard. And that would also be a grave provocation, a very grave escalation if nuclear weapons are brought into the picture, right? And neither is Russia looking to transfer nuclear weapons to North Korea. North Korea has its own illegal rogue nuclear program. It does have enough warheads. So there is no question of transferring nuclear weapons. What you have read is largely rumors, but definitely North Korea is considering weapons transfer. Reports are saying the transfer has already started. But again, we can't verify this immediately unless and until we get something which is authentic information. But yes, Russia and North Korea do share close relations and they have met, the two leaders have met, where Russia has asked military assistance to supply weapons to fuel the war in Ukraine. Does it affect India? Not much. Of course, we keep a watch on these developments, right? But North Korea transferring weapons to Russia won't affect India as much as we think. But yeah, it can prolong the war. That is a possibility. But again, India would be neutral on that. Right? Even if Western countries criticize it, India will be neutral. We won't be criticizing it or taking a stand on it because we have, in general, backed Russia in the conflict. So that position will continue. Next question. In the context of Bangladesh's current geopolitical context, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus is said to be backed by the US in order to counter Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League government. Okay. What importance does this hold from an Indian perspective? Very good question. See, recently there are some developments in Bangladesh. By the way, Bangladesh is headed towards elections very soon. And within Bangladesh, there are many challenges. On one hand, there is rising radicalism, religious fundamentalism, especially under groups like Jamaat, the Jamaat-e-Islami, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and others. Right? They have openly promoted religious fundamentalism, leading to even the persecution and targeting of religious minorities. All right. But as you know, Sheikh Hasina's Awami League government is a secular government. It's a progressive nationalist government which has always been pro India. So, as long as Sheikh Hasina and Awami League are in power, India's interests are protected. We studied how Sheikh Hasina single handedly helped India to target Northeast insurgents who were, hiding in Bangladesh. India's concern is about these radical forces who are openly against India and they are pro Pakistan forces, pro Pakistan elements. Now, in this complex situation, the US is poking its nose. This is American diplomacy, as usual. The US has been poking its nose in Bangladesh because it wants to counter China. China is very close to Sheikh Hasina and Awami League. Don't forget that. Sheikh Hasina might be a good friend of India. She might have helped India with all our security interests and problems. But Awami League and Sheikh Hasina are close to China as well. Bangladesh is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. China has made very big investments in Bangladesh. It has even supplied weapons to the Sheikh Hasina government. But Sheikh Hasina has ensured Chinese influence doesn't threaten Indian influence. She has been able to strike that fine balance. Right? She need not, push China against India or India against China. She hasn't done that. So from India's perspective, Sheikh Hasina is the perfect leader for us in Bangladesh. But the Americans have a problem with this, right? As Bangladesh is a major Indian Ocean power facing the Bay of Bengal, the Americans are trying to counter the Chinese influence in Bangladesh, and that is why they want Sheikh Hasina to go. They've made it quite openly clear. There are very clear evidences to show that the US State Department and maybe the CIA, they're actually working, to ensure Awami League loses the next election. They want Sheikh Hasina to be out of power. All right. And on the other hand, Mohammad Yunus. Who's Mohammad Yunus? He's a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics many years ago for his tremendous work in the world of microfinance. Mohammad Yunus was the one who popularized microfinance, transformed livelihoods through microfinance, where small loans credit is given through microfinancing institutions. If Bangladesh economy transformed, right, especially if women could start their own businesses, right, and if this model could be followed in other countries, including in India, it's because of Mohammad Yunus. The bank he was running, the Bandhan Bank, and the model he created for microfinance is what you know transformed rural economy in many countries. That's why he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics. Now, Mohammad Yunus is being seen as an American puppet who's being propped against Sheikh Hasina. So, Sheikh Hasina's government has filed many cases against Mohammad Yunus, including corruption cases, and he has been arrested as well. So, this is the internal dynamics of Bangladesh. Within Bangladesh, there is this larger game that's going on where US is trying to put pressure on Sheikh Hasina and Awami League in order to restrict Chinese influence. That is what you see, which is happening in Bangladesh today. But Awami League and Sheikh Hasina are the best bet for India. All right. So India does have a problem with the American policy. We have made this clear as well, not to meddle in Bangladesh. It's not America's business to meddle in Bangladesh. India has made this very, very clear. Next question. Given the refugee crisis in Europe, the question is referring to the refugee crisis in Europe. Given the refugee crisis in Europe and the frequent civil wars and disturbances in West Asia, are the European countries and European Union trying to do something about the revival of peace in the region? Okay, to tackle the issue. And what is their approach towards refugees? What in general should be any nation's response to the influx of refugees? See, European countries with European Union are definitely trying to stabilize West Asia. That is for sure. Because West Asia has seen multiple conflicts, from the civil war in Syria and Yemen to spread of terrorism across many countries. West Asia has been a major concern, not just for the region, but even beyond the region. Now, with new conflicts breaking out, like between Israel and Hamas, right, and other geopolitical tensions opening up in the region, so there is a risk of greater flow of refugees. If you guys remember, I had mentioned this as well, how Europe receives a large flow of refugees across the Mediterranean, particularly from West Asian countries, right? Not just from West Asia, even from North Africa as well. In North Africa and also in West Africa, there are civil wars going on. You have dictatorships, extreme poverty, terrorism. So many people, they run away from North African, West African countries as well. They take the risky sea route through Mediterranean Sea to cross over into Europe. So European countries have been dealing with the refugee crisis for many years right now. At least in the last 10, 15 years, the refugee crisis has gone up. The Mediterranean countries like Italy, Greece, Spain, even Cyprus, Portugal, and others, they receive a large influx of refugees through the Mediterranean. From here, the refugees sneak across borders into France, into Germany, into UK as well, or even other countries like Belgium, Netherlands, and even to the Nordic countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway, etc. These are the preferred countries for these refugees who are coming in. from Africa and also from West Asia. Now, the scale of refugee crisis is so severe that it has divided the politics of Europe. See, many European countries, the West European countries, the West European democracies, they are usually liberal, right? Very progressive. They follow centrist policies largely. So many governments here, they accepted refugees. They took in a lot of refugees, like Germany, for example, Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, Finland, Sweden. They all took in a lot of refugees on humanitarian grounds. Those who came seeking asylum, they were granted asylum on humanitarian grounds, because most of the refugees who are fleeing these conflicts and the poverty, right, they're just trying to save their lives. If they stay back where they are, chances are high that they and their family will get killed. So that's why they're running away from countries like Syria, Yemen, African nations, even from Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. All right. But problem is, through the refugee route, there have been terrorists who have sneaked into Europe. Terrorists aligned with Islamic State have sneaked through refugee route and then carried out attacks in Europe. There have been many incidents where bombings have been carried out, shooting incidents have happened, lone wolf terrorism has taken place, where single individual terrorists who have been radicalized, they will take a knife or a gun, they'll stab people, they'll shoot at random innocent people, or they'll take a car or a bus, drive it into crowds and crush them. So such incidents have happened in Paris, in Berlin, recently in Brussels, in Belgium, right? Two Swedish nationals were killed, stabbed by a terrorist aligned with Islamic State. So such incidents have gone up, and this is a complex problem right now. It's leading to social tensions in Europe. In fact, the tensions are so high that within Europe there are many parties that have come up, the more conservative right wing parties, which have taken a stand against refugees. That's why I told you, European politics itself has been divided. In fact, if you notice, across Europe, there is a rise in right wing governments. There is a rise in right wing conservative ideology in Europe, which is a dangerous trend, because the otherwise stable, progressive, liberal democracies, they are swinging towards more radical, conservative, right wing ideologies. Because many of the refugees who come in, right, some of them might get involved in crime. They may not contribute to the economy. Some of them look at them as a burden on their country. And some of the terrorists are sneaking in through the route and carrying out attacks. So, this is where genuine refugees are also facing the brunt. See, this is a disastrous humanitarian crisis. Majority of the refugees will be innocents, will be just trying to save their lives. They have no other option left in their lives. All right. But some of the refugees who resort to crime and illegal activities, some of them who enable terrorists as well, or terrorists sneaking through the route and carrying out attacks, they have escalated the tensions. Europeans, right, largely oppose the entry of refugees. Most of them, right, they're supporting these right wing parties that have come up. They've built entire political base based on this. Many governments have won elections. Many parties have formed governments by winning elections on this issue, by taking a stand against refugees. This is also promoting Islamophobia as well, against innocent Muslims also. So it's become a very complex social problem, right? So some European countries have brought out laws to streamline the process. They have a law where genuine cases of refugees, they will be treated in a humane manner. Those who are genuinely seeking asylum, they'll be permitted. They are putting a cap as well. Per year, these many refugees will be allowed, and the rest will be turned back. And the other tragedy is that many refugees who take the risky route in the Mediterranean Sea, right? They get killed in the sea itself. It's a grave human tragedy which is happening in front of our eyes. Several boats, they sink, killing hundreds of refugees at a time, including young children. So many such incidents have happened in the Mediterranean, because they take the help of these human traffickers who will smuggle them across through the sea route. And these boats are not equipped. These are old rudimentary boats, and they're overcrowded. Boats with a capacity of 20 people will be carrying 100, 150 people, right? So many of these boats, they get caught in the sea, they sink, killing everyone on board. So it's become a humanitarian tragedy, a disaster. So that is why the UN is working on a global framework. The global compact has been brought out on migration. So under that, a proper refugee related convention is being worked out. We have a refugee convention which I discussed in the classes, but it's too outdated. Not many countries have adopted it. So a new framework is being worked out under the global compact on migration. Now, whether countries should accept refugees, see, that is left to them. It's a decision of the government of the day. But India does have a rich tradition of accepting refugees on humanitarian grounds. It's a it's also a basic, obligation to your international commitment under UN Charter, under Universal Declaration on Human Rights. All countries have committed to uphold basic human rights to protect refugees, right? So if it's in your capacity to deal with them, protect them, then definitely why not? But of course, there should be regulations. There should be some responsibility duties imposed on refugees as well, some rights given to them as well. That's what Refugee Convention does. But many countries have not adopted it. So whether countries should accept them or not, it's left to them. Like India, for example, turned back Rohingya refugees. But in the past, we've accepted Tibetan refugees, Sri Lankan refugees, Bengali refugees, Afghan refugees, and even Rohingya refugees have been accepted in the past, right? So government of the day will decide on it. Maybe to streamline that, as I told you, we should have a common law or a policy in place. I discussed this under India Myanmar as well. To streamline this issue, there should be a global convention and there should be a national law under national policy. Next question. In response to increasing Chinese influence in Indian Ocean, the student is referring to Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region in countries like Sri Lanka and the island nations. Okay, she's referring to the growing influence of China in these Indian Ocean countries. So, are we also trying a similar strategy to counter Chinese influence in China's seashore and strategic interests? She's asking whether India is also trying to counter Chinese influence. For example, in South China Sea or in the Pacific or in the East China Sea. Now, this is something we have covered comprehensively. Of course, India is also countering the Chinese influence. If China is stepping up its diplomatic, military, and economic presence all across Indian Ocean, India also is doing the same. Remember, we studied our ties with Japan, Vietnam, with Philippines, how India is exporting BrahMos cruise missile to Philippines. We discussed the close defense relations, the strategic economic ties and defense ties we have with Japan and Vietnam. We spoke about the Quad grouping, the position of the Quad countries. I explained India's position of the South China Sea conflict, right? So definitely India is countering China in its own backyard. If China can meddle in India's backyard, which is our Indian Ocean, India also is stepping up its influence in China's backyard, in the South and the East China Sea and in the Pacific. Next question. Can a possible war break out between China and Taiwan? Can a possible war break out? Because recently we have seen several airspace violations as well as Chinese threats of annexing Taiwan forcefully. So, what will be its impact on geopolitics? See, China Taiwan tensions is something we have discussed in class. We understood the origin of this dispute. Mainland China, which is ruled by the PRC, the People's Republic of China, claims full sovereignty over Taiwan. Right? The communists, when they won the civil war under Mao Zedong, they pushed Republic of China. The then Chinese government was pushed out, along with the then political party, the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang was the Chinese political party which was in power, which was forming the Republic of China. So this government, along with the party, was thrown out and cornered into Taiwan, and that is your Taiwan today. Since then, China has claimed Taiwan for itself. That's why most countries they follow the one China principle. They don't recognize Taiwan. They don't have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Is that clear? No official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Even India does not have official diplomatic relations with Taiwan. All right. Most of the countries, majority of them, they have not recognized Taiwan. They have accepted one China principle, meaning they recognize China's sovereignty over Taiwan. All right. So US, on the other hand, has been taking a ambiguous position. The US has taken a very ambiguous position, and it has been encouraging Taiwan to assert its independence. This is part of the American strategy to contain China, to counter Chinese influence. So, as the US has stepped up its defense supplies and its involvement in Taiwan, China has been more angry and it has been retaliating against Taiwan. You might have read recently that top Chinese leaders and officials they visited Taiwan, right? From the US, especially from the United States, top American officials and diplomats, leaders have visited Taiwan. The US Speaker, the US Secretary of Defense, right? And top American diplomats and officials, they have visited Taiwan, which is seen as a provocation by China, right? Because this is seen as Chinese territory, and US has maintained this ambiguous position, and it has continued these high-level visits deliberately, and also it has been supplying weapons to Taiwan. And the US Navy is deployed near the Taiwan Strait. US military is deployed here in the Taiwan Strait, conducting military drills, saying that they are here to protect Taiwan. Even UK and few other countries are backing the US in this effort. So this is a clear American Western attempt to box China in, to contain China in the region. So for these acts of provocation, China has retaliated with aggression. China has violated the airspace of Taiwan repeatedly. Chinese fighter jets, Chinese naval ships and submarines, they deliberately breach Taiwan's boundaries, right? And they issue threats as well. And China is always on a full alert mode for even a potential war. So if you're asking me if there is a possibility of a war breaking out, definitely yes. One mistake from either side or a series of escalations from either side can trigger a possible war breaking out, right? Taiwan will not instigate. Taiwan is a very weak power. It can never stand up to China, even with Western help, right? It will be very difficult for Taiwan to withstand. But still, Taiwan is quite formidable. You can't rule out Taiwan as such. It is still formidable military power because there is a lot of Western support coming in. But of course, it's nothing compared to China. So Taiwan is unlikely to trigger a conflict. But if someone were to trigger a conflict here, it will be China. If the Americans or Western countries were to do uh, something really escalatory, like they did with Ukraine, right? Then China will definitely decide to go to war as well if required. So the possibility is definitely there. So tensions are very high in the Taiwan Strait. There is constant face-off happening between Chinese and Taiwanese military forces, and even with Western forces, with American forces especially. So this is a flashpoint. So potentially a war might break out, and it will have a devastating impact because Taiwan is also a major economy, along with China being a major economy. And this region here is a very important shipping channel from the Pacific to Indian Ocean. The South China Sea, East China Sea is a link. So this will disrupt supply chains. It will wreak havoc to the global economy, especially chips, semiconductor chips will get disrupted. Taiwan is the leading producer, right? Even China is a major producer. So the war will have a deadly impact on the semiconductor industry and other critical industries, even automobile, several engineering industries, right? And the whole economy and supply chains will take a big hit. And of course, India will also be affected by such a conflict. So yes, definitely the potential is there. Next question. India's relations with Taiwan are bare minimum. Student is referring to India-Taiwan relations. So the relations between India and Taiwan are bare minimum. Should this equation be changed maybe slowly and steadily towards forming friendlier ties? What's the possibility of a covert relationship similar to what we had with Israel? There is no need for that. India, Taiwan have relations already. Please understand that. I mentioned this as well. See, we have no official diplomatic relations. Is that clear? Officially, we don't recognize Taiwan as a country. Officially, we don't have embassies in each other's country. We don't send officially diplomats to each other's country. But however, we do have a very close trade, economic, and tourism relationship and a cultural relationship. There is a Taiwanese Trade Cultural Office in Delhi. Similarly, there is an Indian Trade and Cultural Office in Taiwan, in Taipei, in the capital of Taiwan. At Taipei and in Delhi, we both have offices. These are not embassies, these are not diplomatic missions, but offices are there to facilitate trade and cultural relations. We actually have a very good trading relationship, right? Taiwan is a major supplier of semiconductor chips to India and other critical components, electronic components especially, right? There are Indian businesses operating in Taiwan. Taiwanese companies are operating in India. A lot of tourists also visit each other. So we do have a trade and economic and cultural relationship, all right, but no official diplomatic ties. So there's no need for a covert relationship. But if India ever were to consider this, please remember this will be a grave provocation by India, and China will not take it lying down. China will retaliate. China will not spare a country that will recognize Taiwan or set up ties with Taiwan. You need to acknowledge that China is a vastly superior power. It can deliver significant damage to India if it wants to, right? No Indian government is foolish enough to take the step of setting up ties with Taiwan. We've accepted the one China principle, and to go back on it now would be a grave provocation from India. Unless and until China does something really grave against India, right? So unless those hypothetical scenarios come into picture, no, we will not be having official ties with Taiwan, because we have made a commitment to recognize Taiwan as Chinese territory, as PRC's territory, and that will remain, that will not change. But hypothetically, just to engage in your question, let's say China were to do something very aggressive against India. Let's say it goes to war with India, maybe captures a large Indian territory. Then India might think of such provocations deliberately, to revoke the one China principle, set up ties with Taiwan, and aggressively support Taiwan against China. Otherwise, India will not do it, because we will take the hit. China will retaliate definitely, economically, diplomatically, and even through military methods. It can retaliate against India and deliver a significant pain for India. All right. So there's no question of India setting up ties with Taiwan. We already have trade and cultural ties. That is enough. Official diplomatic ties don't exist. It will never be set up. Next question. In the current global scenario, new wars and conflicts are breaking out almost every year. What could be done to bring about and promote peace at an international level? A good question, because we are living in very difficult times and very interesting times. There's actually a Chinese saying, a proverb, that may you live in interesting times. It works both positively and negatively, right? And honestly, in today's world, we are living in very interesting times, both domestically and abroad. The last few years, especially, has been very, very chaotic in geopolitics. A lot of unprecedented, earth shaking events have taken place. Something unimaginable before, right, has occurred right in front of our eyes. From Taliban takeover in Afghanistan to multiple civil wars in West Asia and Africa, multiple military coups in Africa, then Russia-Ukraine war. It was unthinkable at one point, and now the Israel-Hamas conflict. Even this was unprecedented. The scale of Hamas attack on Israel, the terror attack it carried out, and now the scale with which Israel is retaliating. These were unprecedented, unexpected, right? Trust me, a few years ago, if you had said this would happen, no one would believe this. So such dramatic events have taken place, and to promote peace in such a divided world, you need strong multilateralism. You need multilateralism where multiple governments can focus on promoting peace and stability. Just a few countries can't achieve anything. And also, the world is divided, as I told you. Now, any conflict is not just between two parties, there are others involved as well. Like you take Israel Hamas conflict, there are many other powers involved behind it. Israel is being backed by US and European countries. Hamas is being backed by Iran, Qatar, Syria, and others. Right? You take Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukraine is being backed by all Western countries. Also has the support of China, Iran, North Korea, and the others. Right? So these powers, they are playing their own geopolitical games, their covert wars with each other. So to bring an end to that, at least to stabilize the situation, what you need is multilateralism. So platforms like UN or any such global platform should become more effective. It should become more proactive. But unfortunately, UN in the current format has become ineffective and useless, uh, as all these countries, the P5 countries, have the veto. As we studied, they largely use the veto for their own self interests. We are not finding solutions for any of these conflicts, right? So it's very, very difficult in this situation right now to think of, long term peace and stability. Also, I think this is a pattern. It's an overall pattern around the world where tensions have gone up, not just in geopolitics, even domestically. Domestically, there has been a rise in extremism in many countries, especially right wing extremism. With the advent of social media, right? One ideology which has really gained traction on social media is right wing extremism. And this is across religions, all right? And it's a trend across countries and across the world, from US to New Zealand to India to Europe. Across the world, you will see a drastic rise, a phenomenal rise in right wing extremism. So the rise in tensions, in a way, is attributed to that. The domestic factors are linked to it, right? So, as I told you, it's only neutral mediation, multilateral pressure, which can find solutions to such conflicts. So, this is where I think India can play a big role, as India has always been multi aligned and we have good ties with most of the countries. We can actually play a big role in, bringing some stability, bringing some conversation between these conflicting parties. Not just India, there are others as well, like Brazil. You have Indonesia, which is quite influential, right? Which is also known for its neutrality. All these powers, they'll have to get together. Just one country can't pull it off. Just India or just Brazil can't do it. Collectively, some of these countries, especially from the developing world, they have a lot of stakes. These events which are happening, the wars and conflicts, will affect them the most. Developing countries will take the biggest hit. So they have an incentive as well to act, to collectively work together, use multilateralism, and push the countries to end their tensions, their hostilities, to try and promote peace and stability. Right? But again, it's easier said than done. These conflicts may not end anytime soon, and they might drag. Usually, conflicts hit a stalemate, they'll drag for many more years, bringing more suffering and misery. All right. But let's see what happens. Only time can tell. But as of now, I don't see an immediate solution available to it. Next question. Something called the Korean wave. Something called the Korean wave has took the world by storm. The surge in Korean pop music, K-drama series, and others at international level. Could it be stated as an example of soft power at its best display? And could such cultural waves be state sponsored? Could this be state sponsored? Or are they completely independent? Very good question. This is a very, very good question. I'm sure the younger generation, you guys, the millennials, the Gen Z, you know better about the K wave that is spreading around the world, that has already spread around the world, right? From popular K-pop music to K-dramas and even to Korean food, Korean makeup and cosmetics, right? Or even visiting South Korea as a tourist. Everything has become a massive trend, a viral trend. Now, this is definitely soft power of South Korea at its best. Is that clear? This automatically generates tremendous soft power influence for South Korea. But in the case of the Korean influence you're seeing, it is not state sponsored, it's not intended, it's not planned. This is something that happened organically. Korean entertainment in general, right? starting with Gangnam Style. That is where the K phenomena hit that inflection point. From there onwards, Korean art forms became widely popular, just like Japanese anime, which is extremely popular around the world. Similarly, the Korean art forms, they went to the next level, right? With the internet, with OTT platforms, there's a wider acceptance. There's a bigger audience, a global audience today, right? Plus, even Korean food, as I told you, and just visiting Korea during cherry blossom season has become a huge global trend. This is definitely soft power for South Korea, no doubt about it. But none of this was planned. It's not state sponsored as such. But of course, South Korean government will work on it. They'll leverage this to their advantage to bring more tourists, to bring more influence and positive image for South Korea. But to answer the broader question, do countries do this as a sponsored campaign, right? And or is it completely independent? It can be both. Tell you some examples. The United States during the Cold War carried out a major psychological warfare operation through the CIA to spread American cultural influence as packaged as Western values, as Western culture. Now, why do you think American culture is popular around the world? How come it became adopted around the world? It didn't happen on its own. There was a state push, a secret covert push through intelligence agencies, well planted stories, well made movies, right? The right push given to American music, American food, American culture in general. Part of it would be organic, but there was state push as well, right? From media, for example, across news channels, positive coverage about US. It was indeed the most stable democracy, right? The land of immigrants, the land of the free and the brave, where everyone is welcome, where everyone could realize their dream. This American dream was sold as an idea, just like products are sold. The American dream was sold, all right, and it's not fake. It's not that they're just marketing it, they're lying about it. That's the truth, right? US has remained the most stable economy, the most stable democracy as well, a formidable economic and military power. So they have leveraged that strength. The US government, the intelligence agencies, and the State Department, they've leveraged the strength and promoted the American values and culture that found wide acceptance around the world. That's why in many countries, even if governments don't have good ties with the US, the people of the country will have a positive image about the US. For example, in India itself, I told you, right, until mid 2005, until early 2005, our ties with the US was never great. But Indians in general had a very positive image about the US. You ask your parents, for example, right? Or even our current generation as well, from the 80s, 90s, we have always had a very positive, vibrant image about the US. Going to US is a fascination, right? It's a dream to go to US and study. Why do you think that exists? Why doesn't someone go to other countries? Why do you think US has that kind of appeal? It's because the soft power has been built up. And of course, there has been state influence as well. Now, India also, right? There is some organic soft power for India, and we push soft power as well through Buddhist Circuit Initiative, by promoting yoga, by promoting Indian food, Indian music, Indian movies, right? So this is a part and parcel of geopolitics. Culture and soft power, they do play a big, big role, and you can see that. Some of it will be organic, some of that would be state sponsored as well. All right. So, guys, these were all the questions that had come in. Now, if you have any further doubts, let me know. I'll be here to take few more questions if you want, or else we can look at the PYQs and then we can end the session for today. Let me take a look at the doubt section. Just give me a minute. Pratik is asking difference between consulate, high commission, and embassy. See, embassy or high commission, functionally both are the same. Your primary mission, the main mission you have in the capital of the other country, is an embassy or a high commission. All right? Like the American embassy in Delhi, the British High Commission in Delhi, the Chinese embassy in Delhi. Is that clear? So the main mission, which is in the capital of the country, the main diplomatic mission that you have in the capital, that is either an embassy or a high commission. Functionally, they are the same, only the name is different. Why is the name different? It is called high commission only in former British colonies. Only the Commonwealth countries have this arrangement where they call embassy as high commission. All right, there is no difference. Like Indian High Commission in London, Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. are exactly the same. These are our diplomatic missions in the capital of UK and US, respectively. They perform the same functions. The names are different. That's it. The name is different because the Commonwealth countries, which is a grouping of all the former British colonies along with Britain, they have agreed to designate their missions, their embassies as high commissions, like Indian High Commission in Canberra, Australian High Commission in Delhi, right? Because Australia is a former British colony. Canada as well, Canadian High Commission in Delhi, Indian High Commission in Canada. Whereas with others, it's the embassy, like Indian Embassy in Brazil, Brazil's embassy in Delhi. So that's how it changes. All right, functionally, both are exactly the same. That is the main diplomatic mission in your capital. So this is where the diplomats, they will maintain ties with the government. This is where the ambassadors or high commissioners are deployed. They head the mission. All right, ambassador, high commissioner is again exactly the same. Functionally, role wise, they're exactly the same. The name becomes different in Commonwealth countries, like Indian ambassador to US, but Indian high commissioner to Pakistan, Indian high commissioner to UK, Indian ambassador to China. All right, so only British colonies will address each other as high commissioners. In other countries, it becomes just ambassador. So both are exactly the same. Now, coming to your consulate. Consulates are the regional branches present in major cities. These are the regional missions, the local missions. All right, like in the case of India, major cities like Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, they have many consulates of foreign countries. This is where consular services are provided, like visa services, for example. All right, along with that, they try to promote trade and economic relations in that respective region. In that particular region, they look after any interest the country has, to look for some resources, to bring some investments, to form economic partnerships, etc. Like US consulate in Chennai, right? It will issue visas to Indians, and the US consulate will also have diplomats and consular officials who will have good ties with the state governments at the regional level. They look out for investment opportunities, for cultural economic collaboration in that particular region. Similarly, the Mumbai consulate of the US will do the same work. All right. So consulates are your regional missions, the branches that functions under the main embassy. India also has multiple consulates in US, in Houston, in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, right? We have multiple consulates doing the same uh, work, providing consular services and building trade and economic and cultural relations. But the main mission will always be your embassy or your high commission. That is the basic difference. Vedashri is asking, till how many incidents have happened in IR impacting India's relations with various countries? So till now, whatever has took place in IR, out of that, which are the most important topics according to sir, which might come in mains? Vedashri, your question is not well structured. Not able to understand entirely what you're asking. But yeah, I think you're asking which topics are important for your mains exam from IR. Everything that we have studied can be important, right? But of course, whatever is in news in the last 1.5 years, at least 1.5 to 2 years. That is more important. Understood? So whatever we have discussed in class, actually all the topics are equally important. But yes, based on current affairs of last 1.5 years, you can prioritize those topics. Vedashri is asking, sir discussed many topics, only 4 to 5 questions come in mains. So all of that will be important. Obviously, this is the whole subject. From the subject, you can expect 4 questions in IR, which is still a very big chunk. Plus, there will be related questions in other papers, in other subjects connected with IR. So a total of 7 to 8 questions can be answered from your IR. It's not just 4 questions, right? And this is the syllabus by UPS. You have to cover this to answer those 4 to 8 questions. Dave is asking, Canada is important for India? If yes, then why? Definitely, Canada was important to India, right? Because we do have good trade relations and we have a very big diaspora, right? There are lakhs of Indians, majority of them being Sikh diaspora and others as well, thousands of Indian students, Indian workers. So their safety, their well being is a concern for us. Plus, a trade relationship. Canada has been a source of FDI. Then, Canadian funds, the pension sovereign funds, they are major investors in the Indian economy. They've invested in many key sectors in India. They've backed many startups in India. So the economic cultural relationship has been a key factor. And now that is taking a hit. It will take a hit if the diplomatic ties are affected. A student is asking, Chile is asking, if J&K belongs to us, why don't we take it back from Pakistan? So many soldiers are sacrificing their lives for this also, but until it is still on POK. Now, see, before you suggest anything like that, think about the consequences. Think about the current position and the consequences. We claim POK, correct, but how do you take it back? Taking it back, is it like two kids playing around? You just snatch the toy from the other kid, right? It's not like that. This is two countries you're talking about, which are two formidable military powers. Taking back POK means, right? I hope you realize what you're saying. It means you're going to war with Pakistan, right? You're saying soldiers' lives are being sacrificed. If you go to war, you will lose many more lives, both soldiers and civilians on both the sides. No government is foolish enough to go to war to take back POK, right? Or else it would have happened long back. So, ideally, as I told you, there is no solution for this Kashmir issue as of now. In the given circumstances, status quo will remain as it is. Ideal solution is you settle the boundaries, hopefully as it is, right? Or maybe provide greater autonomy on both the sides to the Kashmir areas, both Jammu and Kashmir and POK, right? And this has to happen only through negotiated settlement, through bilateral talks and negotiations. Other than that, war can never be a solution. And please don't ever suggest this. That will show immaturity on your part. It shows you don't understand, you don't grasp the seriousness of the situation, right? If you suggest going to war, you're war mongering, then you're pushing for war. And UPSC will punish for that. Be it the evaluators, even in the interview, you will be discouraged. You will be definitely given negative marks for that. Don't ever take a stand pro war. Don't ever be pro war. Is that clear? Unless you're defending yourself, that is different. Instigating a war is different, right? If you try to take back POK, that's an instigation coming from India. All right. So don't ever make a suggestion that we are going to war to take back POK. Not in your answers, not in your interview. Mega is asking, sir, why Russia is recruiting Indians into its military? It's not just Indians. Apparently, Russia has recruited Nepalis and many other people as well from Africa and Asia, because Russia is facing a crunch, shortage of soldiers, manpower. It's running out of manpower. So it has called up the reservists as well. It has dragged retired officials as well into the army. But still, the numbers are not enough. So, what is Russia doing? It is paying money to attract foreign youth from poor countries, those who are looking for lucrative jobs. Because you don't forget, Russia has raised a private mercenary army as well, the Wagner Group, right? Even US has a private mercenary group. In fact, it has multiple private mercenaries. But Russia has a major mercenary outfit called the Wagner Group. So it can recruit anyone. Nationality doesn't matter. Today, please understand, war has become corporatized. There is corporatization of war, globalization of war, privatization of war. War has not been limited to states. This is a big risk that these countries are creating. Russia, which is in desperate need of more soldiers, it needs manpower. It is attracting youth from around the world by paying them, by offering them citizenship. Russia has said, you work for Russian army for 1 year, you'll be given Russian citizenship. Because for them, accommodating few thousand, few lakh people is not a big deal. It's such a large country. There will be absolutely no burden on the country. So they desperately need manpower. So that's why they are recruiting from around the world. And according to reports, there are many Indians, many Nepalis, Filipinos, many Africans as well, right, who are struggling. They come from poor families. They don't have good education or good jobs. They don't have a livelihood. So they're obviously attracted by the offer. Many of them have traveled to Russia, right? The Indian government is unaware. I mean, the details are not clear as to how many people might have joined, but it's very, very clear that at least a few hundred have already joined. So they're getting a decent salary compared to what they get in India, and the promise of citizenship if they survive for 1 year. So this is indeed a concern, right? This is clearly, erasing nationalities. Usually, war is fought on patriotic lines, on nationalistic lines, but this globalization, privatization of war, where a corporate element is being brought into it, right, where money is being used as an enticement, is something that is the world is facing, right? So it does remain a concern, and that is something we should bring up with Russia. If Indians are joining the Russian war, right? And it's not just Russia, it's happening on the Ukrainian side as well. Even Ukraine had given a call due to shortage of manpower. It gave a call from around the world to come and join, and it will pay them money, right? For Ukraine, money is not a problem. Money is flowing freely from Western countries. Getting men is the problem. So it's hiring from around the world. So there are many people who have joined Ukrainian forces as well on both sides. So this is leading to a very dangerous situation, right? So India has to bring it up. India has to raise the issue with Russia and even with Ukraine and keep a check on these activities. Ensure Indians at least don't go and join these external conflicts. Rahul is asking, sir, in yesterday's news, the envoys of European Union and US have urged Kosovo and Serbia. They have urged Kosovo and Serbia to normalize their relations by resuming the dialogue before the bitter tensions results in more violence. Don't you think it will affect EU as well, and as well as India? So Rahul is referring to the Serbia Kosovo conflict. This is a very old conflict in the Balkan region of Europe. All right, the Balkan states, they are located in southeast Europe. That's where you have the Balkan mountain ranges. The countries present near the Balkan, they are called Balkan countries or Balkan states. So between Serbia and Kosovo, there is a long-standing conflict from the 1990s. They have even fought a war over this. Recently, tensions have increased again, where few Serbs have infiltrated into Kosovo and carried out an attack. And Kosovo has retaliated, leading to increase in tensions. So there is a possibility of more violence with the potential for a war breaking out again between Serbia and Kosovo. In fact, this whole region has been affected by conflict. This part of Europe, the Balkan region, has seen wars and conflicts in 1990s. You might have heard about countries like Bosnia, Herzegovina, Macedonia. All these are in the same Balkan region, right? And there is a very complex ethnic conflict here. There's essentially an ethnic conflict between different ethnic groups. And this has turned into a national identity and national crisis, leading to these nationality based wars between different ethnicities and ethnic groups. Like Serbs are an ethnic group, the Kosovans are an ethnic group, right? The Bosnians are an ethnic group, Macedonians are an ethnic group. So between these ethnicities on nationalistic lines, wars have been fought here. So the tensions are very prevalent even now. In the 1990s, it was a brutal conflict, but fortunately, it had been brought down due to intervention of the Western countries and the United Nations. There was a UN peacekeeping mission as well, and US and European countries had intervened in the conflict, and the tensions had gone down. The region had become very stable. But of late, tensions are going up. This is another flashpoint you need to watch out for. Just like China, Taiwan, then Nagorno Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia, where Azerbaijan recently won, defeated Armenia, the Armenian outfits, and threw out Armenians. Right? Similarly, this is another flashpoint where a possible war could happen. So that's why EU and US have intervened immediately. They've already started putting pressure, asking these countries to resume their ongoing dialogue to reduce the tensions and prevent further escalation. The last thing Western countries want is another war in Europe, right? They're already dealing with Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Armenia, right? This is enough for the region. They don't want another conflict here, right? And there are reports that Russia might be playing a role. There are reports that Russia might be instigating the tensions to put the EU under more pressure, to put more pressure on European and Western countries. All right. So that is another topic you need to pay attention. It definitely will have an impact on India, right? Because we do have a history here. Many Indian soldiers have worked in this region as part of UN peacekeeping mission. We have lost some soldiers as well in the 1990s. Indian soldiers have worked in Serbia, Kosovo, and Bosnia Herzegovina as part of the UN peacekeeping forces, right? Plus, we do have a decent relationship with the Balkan states. Uh, there are some Indians as well here. We do have decent trade relations. So, definitely, any such conflict will have an impact, right? In today's globalized world, any conflict anywhere will affect every single country. It will affect every single person as well. Is that clear? Like, for example, even all of our lives, every person's individual life, in some way or the other, has been disrupted by the Russia Ukraine war. You may not realize it, right? But definitely there has been an impact. So, in a globalized world, wars will not just affect the region, it will affect the whole world. Chaitanya is asking, what is balkanization, sir? It is cited multiple times. Were Western countries involved in it? Balkanization is a term used to refer to the breakup of Balkan region into multiple countries. All right, due to the ethnic tensions that were prevalent here during the Cold War in the 1980s, there was deep rooted ethnic tensions in the Balkan mountains between different ethnic groups, as I was mentioning. There was a lot of Western interference. You're absolutely right. The Americans, especially the CIA, and UK, France, Germany, the major powers, Italy, they were all meddling in the region, trying to protect their interests against the Soviet influence in the region. This led to different countries backing different ethnic groups, which triggered a full blown out war in 1990s. And eventually, the Balkan region got broken up into multiple countries. So this fragmentation of a larger region into multiple nations is called balkanization. Now, Soviet Union, large country disintegrated into multiple nations. You can call that also as balkanization. The term has a bigger meaning today, right? It comes from the Balkan region, where a region was broken into many countries because of the divisions and differences that came up. All right. So, if a large region or a country breaks up into multiple independent countries, that is called balkanization, where the region is cut, it's divided into multiple nations, usually because of external interference. Any difference between hydropower and hydroelectric power? No, both are the same. They're exactly the same. Anshu is asking importance of NMFT conference. See, I'll explain this under internal security, but just for your basic knowledge, NMFT stands for No Money for Terror conference. It mainly focuses on countering terror financing. Its primary goal is to counter terror financing. It aligns with the FATF goals to counter money laundering and terror financing. So, India recently hosted the NMFT conference after France and Australia, right? India hosted the NMFT conference, and we have urged all the countries to fight terror financing, to fight money laundering, organized crime, which are enabling terrorist financing. So, No Money for Terror conference is a useful international platform for India to target terror financing, especially state-sponsored terrorist financing. All right, so that is where it becomes relevant for India. All right. So, guys, we're in the middle of the session. Let's take a short break. Take a 15 minutes break. So, come back in 15 minutes. Then I'll take up the PYQs first. Let's look at some previous questions for maybe 30, 40 minutes, and I'll come back to your questions. We'll be here till 9:30. Anyways, I'm getting a good number of questions. It's really good. I'm really glad and happy you're asking so many questions. All right. So, that's a good, very good practice. Continue doing that. So after the break, we'll discuss PYQs for some time. Then I'll come back to your questions. We'll look at as many questions as possible. Let's be here till 9:30. All right. So see you in 15 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the session. Now, let us spend some time in looking at some previous questions that have come. Let's look at some prelims questions and mains questions as well. We'll discuss some of them, we'll look at the answers for some of them. The rest, I just want you to take a look at the questions to understand what kind of questions have been coming. What's the format of questions? What kind of topics are being picked, right? So that will give you an insight into, what topics are more relevant for the exam. So after that, we'll again come back to your doubts. We'll spend at least another hour on your doubts. So first, let's look at the PYQs. Look at this question from 2022 prelims. Which of the following statements best reflects the issue of Senkaku Islands, sometimes mentioned in the news? Go through the options. I launched the poll for some questions at least, so you can try and give the answer. Let's see how many of you can get this right. The poll is live. Just read the options carefully. It's believed to be artificial islands made by China, made by a country in South China Sea. It's a maritime dispute between China and Japan in East China Sea, or American military base. 68% have given option B as the answer. You're absolutely correct. We studied the South China Sea dispute and the dispute in East China Sea. Right? I'd mentioned the Senkaku Islands, also called the Diaoyu Islands, which is a dispute between China and Japan. So such questions can come based on ongoing tensions and disputes and based on locations that are in news. Right? This is in a way related to mapping and places in news as well. So these are the kind of questions you can expect. Very basic, very simple. But if you have the conceptual knowledge about these topics, you can easily answer them. I'll show you one more map-based question from this year's prelims. As the Ukraine war broke out, obviously UPSC asked a question on this. It's asking you to identify which of the countries share a land border with Ukraine. So when we studied Russia-Ukraine conflict, I showed you many maps. So if you paid attention, you would have noticed which are the neighboring countries. So from the given options, you need to select which of them, or rather, how many of them. It's the number being asked here. How many of the given 6 countries share a land border with Ukraine? So such map-based questions can come. All right. So how do you get better at such questions? Whenever you come across a location or a region or any geographical feature which is in news, which is related to IR, because of geopolitical issues, if a particular place or a geographical location is in news, open the map, see where it is located, identify this on a map, keep an atlas with you, use Google Maps as well, and always be familiar with the geography of the place. Not just the countries that are present, but even the important cities, important physical geographical features like mountains, the seas and oceans present around it, important rivers, etc. Right? Or straits, gulfs, all such important geographical features become very relevant for the exam. So this comes only with practice. As you know, international relations is largely based on geography. Geopolitics is a feature of geography, right? Physical and human geography of a place influences the international relations of the place. So you cannot ignore the geography part associated with IR. You have to be good in mapping. You have to get good with locations. The only way you can do this is by looking at more maps. So in the class as well, I've used so many maps. Just go and revise them. And in newspapers, if you find any new location, if you don't know where it is, right, open a map, identify all these features, and automatically it'll get registered. Next, this question we had covered in the previous week itself. Let's look at this question. This question from 2015. The question is related to IOR-ARC. Now it is called IORA. But back then, the name was IOR-ARC. We studied this under Indian Ocean. So look at the following statements. It was established very recently in response to incidents of piracy and accidents of oil spills. It's an alliance meant for maritime security only. Which of them are correct? I'm starting the poll for this question. Let's see how many of you can get it right. Let's see if you remember what we studied about IORA grouping. I explained when it was formed, who are the members, what is its primary purpose, what are the focus areas of IORA. So based on that, you can easily answer this question. 38% have said option A. Another 38% have said option D. So clearly, there is a divide. Many of you have been confused. If you had clarity on the topic, trust me, you would have got the right answer. Option D is the correct answer. Both statements are incorrect. IORA was not set up very recently. Look at the term. I underlined the term as well. Very recently. Question came in 2015. So very recently would mean 2013, 2012. But IORA was set up back in 1990s. You need not even remember the exact year. Just knowing that, okay, it was set up in 1990s is enough to dismiss this statement as a wrong statement. It was not set up very recently. It was set up almost 20 years ago, right? Second statement is wrong. It's meant for maritime security only. It deals with maritime security, correct. There are other focus areas as well, like trade and economic relations, disaster management, climate change, blue economy model, cultural ties between the rim countries. It's not just for maritime security. That is why this is also wrong. So read the statements carefully. Concentrate on these keywords. Sometimes UPSC might trick you. It's not meant only for maritime security. If it says maritime security is a key focus area, then it would have been a correct statement. But maritime security is the only focus. That makes it a wrong statement. So both are incorrect. D is the correct answer, neither one nor two. Next, see, military exercises can come as a question. Very simple, very straightforward. You just have to be thorough in current affairs. Newspapers will give you all this information. We will cover this in our weekly webinars as well, in our daily Hindu analysis. Right? That is where you pick up your current affairs from, plus your monthly magazines. Next, see this question from SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Lot of questions can come from regional groupings. That's why I tried covering as many groupings as possible in different regions. The question says it's an intergovernmental organization to promote cooperation in trade, politics, and culture. The anti-terrorist structure of SCO is located in Beijing. Remember, we spoke about RATS, the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure, which is a platform for countering terrorism. So based on the two statements given, you can identify which of the statements are correct or incorrect. So take this as a small exercise. Find out the headquarters of RATS. Is it in Beijing or not? First statement is obviously correct. It is an intergovernmental organization focused on trade, politics, and culture, and many more. So first statement is not incorrect. It's definitely correct. Second statement, check. Take this as a small assignment. Check where RATS is headquartered, so that you'll read about this organization again. All right. You know what is RATS. I've explained it. Find out where it is headquartered. So that will give you the right answer. Some of them have given the answer already. Very good. But others, take it up as an exercise. Next, another question, 2015. Again, on regional groupings. India is a member of which of the following? The APEC, Asia Pacific Economic, it's not corporation actually, it's cooperation. It's a typographical error. Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. The ASEAN, East Asia Summit. Select the correct answer. For this, I'll launch the poll. Let's see how many of you can answer this. East Asia Summit, ASEAN, APEC. India is a member of which of the following? It's actually a very simple question. 10 seconds to go. All of you, please try to attend the answer. Very good. 42% have given the right answer. 3 only. India is a member of only East Asia Summit. Remember, we studied East Asia Summit. We saw the members as well. It has the 10 ASEAN countries plus 8 countries which are dialogue partners of ASEAN: India, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, USA, and Russia. These are the 18 countries which are members of East Asia Summit. So India is definitely a member of it. But ASEAN, we are not a member. Only the Southeast Asian countries are ASEAN members. So obviously, you can rule out two. APEC is a grouping of Asia Pacific region led primarily by US and other Pacific countries. India is seeking membership to it. We want to be a member, but India is not a member. So 1 and 2 are ruled out. B becomes the correct answer. 3 only becomes the correct answer. Next, see, Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, often seen in news, is what? Strategy to tackle regional terrorism under SCO, Plan of Action for Sustainable Economic Growth in Asia Pacific, and an outcome of deliberations of the APEC Forum, Agenda for Women's Empowerment, an outcome of World Conference convened by the UN, Strategy to Combat Wildlife Trafficking under East Asia Summit. I launched the poll. Let's see how many of you can answer this. I know some of you might say, sir, you didn't discuss this topic. How do we answer it? How do we cover such topics? I'll tell you. That's why I picked this question. 5 seconds to go. 43% have said option A. Around, I think, 27% said option B, 28% said option C. Majority of you have got the wrong answers. Very few people have got the right answer. Option C is the correct answer. All right. Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action deals with women empowerment. It was brought out by the UN following the World Conference on Women Empowerment. It's actually an old topic. Now, how do you prepare for this? Why didn't I cover this in class? See, there are hundreds of conventions, treaties, declarations, hundreds of organizations. It's impossible to cover everything in class. Then, how do you prepare? How do you answer this? Trust me, it's easy. It's not difficult. It's all about current affairs. These are the topics which we have to cover in current affairs, not in class. If you try to do this in class, even 1 year of classes is not enough for IR. Diplomatic relations can be covered, regions, some groupings can be covered, some important conventions, treaties can be covered. Not everything that is there. There are hundreds of them, literally. So, in your current affairs, those which are in news in the last 1.5 to 2 years, the conventions which are in news, the treaties which are in news, right? Organizations which are in news. In total, it might be around 40 to 50 topics, not more than that. Those will become relevant. This question was asked in 2015 because that year, Beijing Declaration on Women Empowerment was back in news. Those students who read their current affairs, read newspapers, they easily marked the answer for this question. Is that clear? Now, you can't sit and read, as I told you, everything. It's a waste of your time. And honestly, you'll not even remember if you try to cover every organization, every convention, every treaty. So, focus on your current affairs. Focus on those topics that are in news in the last 1.5 to 2 years and make a note. Now, Beijing Declaration will not come again. It will not be asked. As I told you, this is an old one. It's actually a very old declaration. It was asked again by UPSC because in 2015 it was in news. It was in newspapers. So those who read newspapers well, they will know what it is, what it deals with. And again, UPSC is not going in depth. Look at how different the options are. Just linking Beijing Declaration with women empowerment and UN is enough. Just 3 points. Beijing Declaration deals with women empowerment. It's under UN. This simple point is enough for you to answer such questions. Right? You can rule out other options. So current affairs is everything here for such prelims questions. There will be such questions, right, which of course can't be covered in class, but this is through current affairs. That is why I'm urging you, don't miss any webinars. Regularly watch our Hindu analysis. Read the daily CNA, the compilation that we are providing, right? Go through the monthly magazines. That is where you'll pick up these topics. In total, you'll have maybe 40, 50 topics throughout the year. And that is where questions will come from. Look at this one. It's a very different format of question UPSC asked us in 2023. This year was a surprise for everyone, right? No one, even faculties, we didn't expect such statements to be asked. It's a very different format UPSC has picked, mainly to eliminate the elimination method. Because in other questions that you saw, through elimination trick, you can remove the options and still get the right answer. You can take a calculated guess. But with this format, it is impossible. So UPSC has ruled out calculated guessing and elimination method. You should know all the statements to give the right answer, and you should know how they are connected as well. If you see in 2023, it also asked questions on how many statements are correct, how many statements are incorrect. So you should know about all the statements given. You can't eliminate, you can't go by the elimination method. See this question: Israel has established diplomatic ties with some Arab states. That is statement 1. Statement 2 says Arab Peace Initiative mediated by Saudi Arabia was signed by Israel and Arab League. Which of the statements is correct in respect of the above statements? Now you can answer this question by knowing about Abraham Accords, how Israel has set up ties with some Arab countries, right? By knowing about the Arab Peace Initiative. So these again were in current affairs. Now, of course, I've discussed Abraham Accords, but the Arab Peace Initiative was also in news. So based on that, you can easily select the right answer, mention whether it's the correct explanation or not as well, and accordingly provide the right option. So this is something you should prepare for. You can't just rely on elimination method and calculated guessing. Such format questions can also be asked. So I picked this question here so that you're familiar with this format. You know that, okay, such format questions are also asked. Next one, very simple, something we have covered again and again. The term two-state solution, right, is related to the affairs of which country? I'm sure all of you will get it right. Israel. Such simple questions can also come, right? Some questions can be difficult, some are moderately difficult, but some can be very easy and straightforward. So don't miss out on these questions. Basic knowledge is needed. That's it, nothing else. See, another question. Which are the free trade partners of ASEAN? Remember, we spoke about the dialogue partners of ASEAN, right? They are the ones who have FTAs with ASEAN: USA, Japan, India, China, Australia. So you can go ahead and get the right answer based on the basic knowledge which is there. Then look at another one on Chabahar port. What's the importance of developing Chabahar port? Right? 4 statements are given. Let's see if you can answer this. I launch a poll here. What is the purpose? What is the significance for India for developing Chabahar port in Iran? Will it help our trade with African countries? Will it help oil trade with Arab countries or access to Central Asia, Afghanistan? Or Pakistan will facilitate the installation of a gas pipeline? Very good. 75% of them have got it right. If you know where Chabahar port is located, right? What is Indian involvement in the project? Why is India focused on the project? Those 2-3 points are enough to get you the right answer, right? Mainly, Chabahar port is for giving us access to Afghanistan, Central Asia by bypassing Pakistan without depending on Pakistan. Next, another straightforward question from that year's current affairs, from that period's current affairs. Recently, there were several uprisings referred to as Arab Spring. Originally, it started in which country? The Arab Spring movement. It was a pro-democracy movement. I launched the poll again. Let's see how many of you know about it. It's an old topic. You don't have to worry about it now. But we did mention Arab Spring. I'll mention this in internal security again. In IR also, there was a mention of Arab Spring. It was a series of pro-democracy protests that broke out in 2010, 2011. For 2 years, a series of pro-democracy movements happened and many governments were toppled as well. So where did this begin? 33% have said Egypt. 25% have said Syria. I can understand why you are selecting Egypt and Syria, because you would have heard about Egypt's government being toppled. You would have heard about the Syrian civil war. Yes, Egypt, Syria were also affected by Arab Spring. Definitely, the Arab Spring movement spread to these countries as well. That is what caused the civil war in Syria. That's what caused the change in government in Egypt. But still, it's not the right answer. It's not the correct answer because it's asking where did it start? Where did this originally start? The answer is Tunisia, in the small North African country facing the Mediterranean Sea. That is where the movement started. All right. In 2010, right, Tunisian citizens, they rose up in rebellion against their dictator. The country was affected by dictatorship. There was massive corruption, right, and there was no development. So a fruit vendor who was frustrated with the bribes he was paying to the police, he had been exploited with the local police. They wouldn't allow him to set up his fruit cart, and repeatedly they were extracting bribes from him. So this fruit vendor who was frustrated, he rebelled against the police by setting himself on fire. He committed suicide. This incident was the spark for Arab Spring. This suicide committed by the fruit vendor because of corruption, as an act of protest against corruption, triggered a movement on Facebook and social media. Facebook played a critical role here. The Tunisian people, they organized on Facebook, as it was not under government surveillance. Right? Social media was new back then. It was newly spreading around the world. So through Facebook and other social media platforms, the people of Tunisia organized themselves, right? And it was an organic, genuine movement to fight for democracy, to fight for their rights, and to throw out the dictatorship, which was corrupt. So this is where it started, and the idea went viral. So in Tunisia, the dictatorship was toppled by the people. Then the movement spread to Egypt, then to Syria, and other countries took over the movement. Regional external powers, they turned this into a covert war. They misused the same platforms, Facebook and social media, to instigate rebellions in target countries, to carry out regime change, to topple the governments. So this series of protests and movements that went on, uprisings in North Africa and West Asia, is called Arab Spring. It started in Tunisia. Next, we studied Comcasa, right? It's related to the United States, which India had signed in 2018. Again, straightforward questions. Then look at this question from this year, from Africa. In recent years, Chad, Guinea, Mali, Sudan have caught international attention. For which reason? I was mentioning this when we discussed India Africa. Right? We had a discussion on India Africa. I made a mention of this. So let's see if you can answer this. 10 seconds to go. Very good. 43% have got the right answer. Because of successful military coups. In the last 3 years, there have been multiple military coups in African countries, and this is always in news. So you have to pay attention. In which country military coups happened? Which countries are going through civil war? You don't need the details. UPSC will not ask you why the civil war started in Sudan, why the military coup happened in Chad. The details will not be asked. Just the basic awareness, just the basic knowledge, which is readily available in your newspapers. All right. So these are the kind of questions which will come. You can take a look. There are many more questions I've added here from all the recent question papers. So please go through this once. Take a look at all the prelims questions that have come. That is the best way to prepare. Once you finish your syllabus, the best way to prepare is to revise. Revise and also take up PYQs, as many PYQs as possible. I would suggest solve all the PYQs, right? Collect all the papers from 2013 at least, from 2013 to 2023. Solve all the question papers, prelims and mains. Trust me, you'll be in a much better position after that. You'll also get a fair idea as to what kind of questions come, as to what kind of topics are chosen by UPSC. So that's, I think, enough of prelims questions. We've looked at quite a few. You can look at the rest. Now let's see some mains questions. We had covered this question on India Bangladesh in the previous discussion. Let's take up another question. Let's start from here. I want to show at least a good 4 or 5 questions regarding what kind of mains questions are being asked, what kind of topics are being picked. See, this is related to India China from 2017. China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus as tools to develop potential military power status in Asia. In the light of the statement, discuss its impact on India as a neighbor. Now, didn't we study this topic? We carried out a thorough analysis of this topic, not just under India China, but even under other topics as well. I kept telling you that China tries to exploit its economic advantage. It tries to gain a leverage, a geopolitical leverage on countries by misusing the trade surplus it has with them, and also the debt burden it places on the smaller countries. It misuses these economic advantages and coerces and forces the small countries to gain geopolitical advantages, to gain strategic military advantages, right? So that is what the question is dealing with. Now, how do you approach answer writing? I had given you this strategy in the last class as well when we discussed PYQs. I'll repeat that if you want. See, to write a good mains answer, there are a few basic steps you need to follow. Nobody will write good answers on the first day. And trust me, majority of them are not born with good answer writing skills. This is a skill that you develop. It's an art. It's a skill that you develop over a period of time. It will not happen in 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. It will happen over a few months, provided if you're consistent. If you consistently practice on a daily basis, in 2 to 3 months, you will see a significant improvement in your answer writing skills. Now, the question is, how do you write a good answer? How do you get better marks? UPSC tells us in the notification, if you go through the notification, UPSC is telling us what to provide in an answer. UPSC's expectations are very clearly outlined. UPSC wants a concise answer. That's why the word limit is given to you. You can't write thousands of words, 350, 400 word answer, or you can't end your answer in just 50 words. If the word limit is mentioned, your answer has to be around that, maybe 130 to 140 words or 160 to 170 words. Of course, you can't sit and count that in the examination hall, but you will get a rough idea depending on your handwriting, depending on how you space your answer. You will get an idea on how many words will fit in one page, right? So you'll get the UPSC answer sheet on the internet, on online platforms. It is available. Download the answer sheet, take a printout, and start writing. See how many words will fit in your handwriting. It will change from person to person. Let's say in my handwriting, I can fit 40 words in one sheet. So I know that, okay, in 3, 4 sheets, I have to end my answer. That's how you keep a rough calculation, right? In the examination hall, where you have hardly 7 to 8 minutes per answer, you can't sit and count the words. No one will do that. But a rough estimate, if these many words can fit in my handwriting in this sheet, how many sheets can I write for this question? It's as simple as that, right? So for 150 words, maybe 2 sheets or 2.5 sheets is the maximum you can write. So your answers has to be concise, precise, to the point. You can't beat around the bush, write unnecessary things. Just because question is dealing with a particular topic, you can't write everything related to it. Now, in this question, if you write about India-China border tensions or border dispute, even if your points are correct, nobody will give you even a single mark for that. The question is something else. It's dealing with China's strategy of misusing its economic leverage for geopolitical gains and military gains, and how does it impact India? That is the question. So you have to hit the nail on its head. Don't waste a single word. Don't waste a single second. Keep your answers concise, precise, to the point. Your answer has to be well structured. UPSC has made this very clear. UPSC says in the notification that there should be a logical flow of thought. Meaning, based on the question, you have to structure the answer. According to the question, answer has to be structured. Right? You can't just add random points here and there. From the start to the end, there has to be a proper flow, a logical flow. And when someone reads that, they should they should be able to understand as to what this question was dealing with. Right? That should be the whole idea. Now, read the question carefully to ensure you can structure the answer and have a logical flow. Read the question, understand the question. Just because you look at China, India, and some trade surplus military power, don't start writing random points. Any mains aspirant will have lot of information, lot of knowledge. You can't simply dump it on your answer sheet. Think for a second. Give yourself 30 seconds before you start writing. All right, read the question twice if you want. In every question, there will be sub questions. There will be at least 2 to 3 sub questions in every question. So break down the question first. If you look at this, the first question is the statement itself. China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus to develop potential military power status in Asia. This is your first question, even though it's not like a question, there's no question mark there, there's no keyword given. Still, it is part of the question. You can't simply ignore this and write only about the impact on India. You can't do that. You'll still lose marks. You have to do justice to the question. Every sub question, you have to address it. So start the answer with an introduction. Introduce the Chinese strategy of how it uses the trade advantage for strategic gains. In the introduction, you can write 1 or 2 lines saying, yes, China has been using this strategy, which we have noticed that the trade surplus and the economic advantages it has, even the debt burden it pushes other countries into, it is leveraging that to gain strategic military advantages in Asia. That is your stand, your opinion, your analysis of the question. You make that clear in the introduction itself. You are hitting the nail on its head. The moment evaluator reads the first 2 lines, he gets to know, oh, this student has understood the question, he knows the topic, and is giving the right opinion, not just a fact. You're not just reproducing something you have memorized, right? So don't mug up points and just dump them here. Evaluators will get to know. The moment you provide such assessments, they'll get to know, okay, this is a person who is writing his own answers. He knows the question, he's understood it, he's giving the right opinion as well. Now, justify this. That's why the body, whatever opinion you expressed in your introduction, justify it. Give solid evidence to prove that. Point out China's ties with Sri Lanka, China's ties with Myanmar, right? China's ties with some African countries, even with India, or even with US and European countries. How it is using the trade surplus and the debt crisis it has created, and how it is gaining military, geopolitical, and strategic advantages. Right? Mention its control over Hambantota port, right? Chinese investments in Myanmar, or how China can leverage its economic strength against India to punish India geopolitically. You can mention how dependent Indian economy is on Chinese imports, right? So by mentioning that, you can say when tensions are high, China can cut off the supplies which can harm our economy, leading to a strategic uh, defeat for India, right? So provide that examples in the body, back up your opinion, give those evidences, then conclude with the impact. What is the impact? What can India do about it? Provide a way forward as well. Discuss the impact. The impact is, now that India has a big trade deficit, and we have a lot of import dependency, our fear is China can misuse this, especially because we have a border dispute, standing border dispute going on. So it can use the economic advantage to punish India with regard to the border dispute. By cutting off key supplies to India, it can punish India for the border issues that are going on. So that is the major impact. Now suggest a way forward as well, if possible. Like we should become more self-sufficient. It's not just about India, even we should help others as well. Help other countries, focus countries to reduce their dependency on China. Like help Sri Lanka, help Nepal, Bangladesh, so that the core countries for India, they are not too dependent on China. As China can misuse this, it will be a threat for us across Asia. So provide one small paragraph as a conclusion, as a way forward. That will complete your answer. Right? So this might seem a little complicated right now, initially, but trust me, with practice, it will become easier. So what you do is, every day you'll be reading something, right? You'll attend a class, then you'll read newspapers, you'll take up another subject, read it on your own. So whatever you studied in a day, when you're ending your day, when you're going to bed, just before you go to bed, give 15 to 18 minutes, sit and take up 2 questions from what you have studied in that day. One question maybe from current affairs, from the newspaper and the current affairs you have read. One question from the static part, from the class or the subject, the GS or optional subject you have studied. 2 questions from what you have studied, not from something else, not a random question. Based on what you have studied throughout the day. You might have studied for 6 hours or 8 hours. From what you have studied, pick 2 questions. Make your own question. It's very easy. Make your own question, right? Initially, question may not be good. Doesn't matter. Make a question on your own or take up the practice questions we are giving and start writing an answer to it. Do this every day. And again, you can't look and write. You can't, take the question, then research and write, take 1 or 2 hours to write the answer. That will not help. You might write beautiful answers by researching, by looking at material. That will not help you. In examination, that's not how it works. Right? You read everything, you go to the exam hall, sit and write on your own. That's exactly how you have to practice. You have to simulate the exam condition. Based on what you have studied in 6 to 8 hours, you have taken two questions, you are expected to write an answer to it. Right? So don't refer anything. Close everything. Close your computer, keep your mobile phone away, close your textbooks. Just keep an answer sheet, a pen, and write answers to it. Also, time limit is important. You can't take 1 hour to write the answer. Two questions, you should end. Ideally, for one question, you will get, for 10 marks, you'll get 7.5 minutes. For 15 mark questions, you will get around 11 minutes approximately. If you divide like this, that is when you can answer all the 20 questions in the paper. Or else you're going to leave some questions, you'll lose marks. If you have to attempt all questions, you have to allocate time. 7.5 minutes for your 10 markers, 11 minutes up to 11 minutes for your 15 markers. So accordingly, give the same time, maybe 16 to 18 minutes. Two questions, you should be done with it. Chalo, let's say 20 minutes. Even that is fine. 20 minutes for two questions, 10 minutes per question. If you do this regularly, right, just 15-20 minutes of effort every day, do this consistently, at least 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. Then see where you stand 3 months later. It will make a very big difference. All right. Sometimes get the answers evaluated. Maybe once a week, show it to your peers. Maybe if you have a mentor, right, or reach out to our mentors, right, reach out to them, get your answers evaluated once in a while. Not daily. You don't have to get it daily. You don't have to get a daily evaluation. At least weekly, couple of answers, get them evaluated, so you get some feedback. You'll get to know where you're going wrong, where you can make improvements, where you've done a good job. So that feedback will help you further improve your answer writing. And review for yourself as well. Once you write the answer, sit for some time, see how you have written, think what else you could have done. Right? So this self preparation is needed. The exam requires self preparation. This can't be spoon fed. Nobody can spoon feed or teach this to you. This is something that comes, it builds through effort, consistent effort and practice. We are there to help you out, but you have to put in that effort, that extra effort, because this is how the exam is. It's not just a factual exam, it's testing all your skills, your conceptual skills, your ability to structure answers in a precise manner with a logical flow. That is being tested here. So only with practice can you improve answer writing. Trust me, if you don't do this, there is no way you can clear the exam. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying this to encourage you to write answers more frequently. If you don't write answers, if you don't practice answer writing, it is impossible to crack the exam. Take it from me. But at the same time, the opposite is true. If you practice regularly, then at the end, if you take up enough answer writing tests, practice tests, full length tests, there is nothing that can stop you from cracking the exam. Is that clear? So please remember this. It's very, very important. Let's see one more question. 2020 mains. Question on Indo-Pacific. Quad is transforming into a trade bloc from a military alliance in present times. Discuss. Now, this is something I covered as well. Remember, I explained how Quad was being given a military angle by US, Japan, and Australia. They're trying to set it up like a military alliance to make this a proper counter to China. But India rejected this approach, right? Because we don't join any military alliances. We don't join any clubs, military clubs, to counter one country, target one country. We have never done that. This is our principle of strategic autonomy. So you need to mention all of this. Start out by mentioning what is Quad. You can give a small introduction. Quad is such a grouping focused on this. Its focus is to enforce rules-based order. Don't even mention its focus on countering China. That is an assessment by experts and the media. Government never says Quad is for countering China. No country says that openly. They are saying our objective is to enforce rules-based order. enforce international rules in Indo-Pacific, keep Indo-Pacific free and open, protect freedom of navigation, right? That is the purpose of Quad. So mention that in the introduction. These are the countries, this is the objective. So yes, it was being seen as a counter to China, and some of the members were trying to give it a military approach. But India firmly rejected this approach as we believe in the principle of strategic autonomy. We have never joined military alliances or military clubs targeting any country. And also, India is a neighbor of China, unlike US, Japan, and Australia. We share direct land borders, the two are disputed border. If a military alliance threatens China, China will not retaliate against Australia or US, which are far away. It will retaliate against India. It will step up border tensions with India, not with US or Australia. So we will end up paying the price. So we don't want to trigger China unnecessarily as well. We don't want to provoke. We're not in the business of provoking. We are not an aggressive power. So keeping these factors in mind, India pushed Quad to diversify. And today, Quad has become a diversified grouping. It almost appears like a trade bloc. It's dealing with trade and economic relations. It's dealing with vaccine development, critical emerging technologies, right? So mention all the changes that has happened with Quad, how it has become a more diversified group, almost like a trade group, instead of just being a military alliance. That is what you should explain. You can even point out that Malabar naval exercise, then the 2+2 dialogues, they're not part of the Quad directly, right? At least 2+2 dialogue is fine. That's a diplomatic engagement. But Malabar exercise, which is a military exercise, has been kept separate. Even though it's the same Quad countries who are participating, India has ensured that Malabar exercise is separate from Quad. Malabar exercise is not directly connected to the Quad grouping. You can mention that point as well to show that Quad is not a military alliance. Next, one more question again on Indo-Pacific and the relations we have with the big powers, US and Russia. It's asking what's the significance of the defense deals, Indo-US defense deals over Indo-Russian defense deals. Discuss with reference to stability in the Indo-Pacific. The question might seem to be complicated initially, but trust me, it's not. You have to understand the nature of defense deals between India, Russia, India, and US. Russia has been a age-old military partner for India. From 1960s, it has been supplying weapons to India. That is Soviet Union, then Russia. Even though Russian weapons have been helpful in modernizing our armed forces, right? Today, our armed forces are largely relying on the Russian era weapons that we have, the Soviet era and Russian era weapons. Definitely, Russian defense platforms are the backbone of our armed forces. You can mention some of them, like Sukhoi, then the MiGs, right? Then the T-90 battle tanks, the BrahMos missile, etc., etc. Then compare that with the Indo-US defense deals, how it is slightly different. Mention that we have had issues with Russian weapons. Sometimes the technology has been outdated, right? Or it's too expensive. As Russia had a monopoly, it used to quote higher prices, extract more money from India. We saw this happening with INS Vikramaditya. When we procured this old aircraft carrier and rebuilt this aircraft carrier and then got it from Russia, Russia deliberately increased the prices. It doubled the price actually. We were forced to pay that because Russia knew no one else will give us an aircraft carrier. And we didn't have any indigenous aircraft carrier. Russia exploited this advantage and monopoly deliberately by delaying the deal and jacking up prices. We finally ended up paying double the price where we started. So this was a concern for India, right? Russia's monopoly on our defense sector. The other concern was outdated technology and the costly servicing, repairs, frequent crashes and accidents. Mention the MiG accidents. MiG became known as the flying coffin, right? Repeatedly, it would crash, killing Indian pilots. Many Russian platforms have failed in actual, in actual real world conflict. So that has been a concern for India. So that is why we are making a shift, keeping China's rise in mind in the Indo-Pacific, as China is posing a formidable threat with modern weapons to India. We can't simply rely on Russian outdated weapons which may not even work properly, and that too which are expensive and which might be difficult to maintain. So, along with the current Russian weapons we have tried procuring more advanced weaponry from US, which is more crucial to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. Mention the platforms we have got from US, the P-8I Poseidon, right? The C-17 Globemaster, C-130J Super Hercules, the Harpoon missiles, M777 howitzers, the Sea Guardian drones that we are procuring, the helicopters, Apache, Chinook, then the Seahawk helicopters. You have to mention all of them. Mention that these have tremendous capabilities, especially in the maritime domain. Because in Indo-Pacific, China's biggest threat to India is in the maritime domain, where Chinese naval ships, submarines, and spy vessels are docking near Indian ports and threatening India in Bay of Bengal, in Indian Ocean. So mention that. Mention that these American platforms help us in maritime security, maritime reconnaissance, anti-submarine warfare. It also helps us to, counter China in the land border areas across the Himalayas. So that is the difference you bring out. But you should also mention Russia is also supplying key weapons like S-400, which is crucial for air defense against China. So basically, you're drawing a comparison. Don't just criticize Russia. It should be a constructive criticism, a balanced criticism, right? Mention all the help from Russia, the dependency that we have, but also highlight the drawbacks. Why we are relying more on the US, right? But at the same time, Russia remains a key partner. You can't ignore Russia. Russia is still a critical defense partner. It is supplying major weapons like S-400, the advanced assault rifles, and other technologies, right? Our military ties continue, but both have their own unique role to play as far as our interests in Indo-Pacific are concerned, right? You can definitely mention US platforms are more useful for India to counter China, but of late, yes, there are Russian platforms as well, which is helping India counter China in the Indo-Pacific. So that is how you build and present this answer. Let's see one more question. India, Japan. An entire question on Japan had been asked. The time has come for India, Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship, one involving global and strategic partnership that will have a great significance for Asia and the world as a whole. Comment. Right? We studied India Japan relations in detail. You just have to present those points in a structured manner. Don't just focus on China and the strategic defense relations, focus on all the aspects, the economic relations, the free trade agreement we have, the Chinese loans, the Japanese loans, concessional loans Japan has given to India, right? The investments Japan has made, the cultural ties, the strategic ties. Mention all of them, right? So break down your answer maybe into different categories. Give an introduction saying India, Japan have very close strategic ties, but we can do more. Then in the body, break it down. Mention that we have close defense strategic ties. So these are the key initiatives we have. Then under economic ties, mention some key points. Under cultural ties, mention some key points, right? Or under Indo-Pacific, you can mention some points, how we are cooperating in the Indo-Pacific to counter China. So break down the answer like this, 3-4 categories, mentioning 3-4 points under each category. Finally, conclude the answer with a positive conclusion. You can mention how we have a great future for India-Japan relations, right? And end this on a positive note. See, there is a question on Central Asia as well. Number of outside powers have entrenched themselves in Central Asia, which is a zone of interest to India. Discuss the implications in the context of India joining Ashgabat Agreement. It was asked because in 2018, India joined Ashgabat Agreement, which we have studied. So, what is the question saying? There are many outside powers entrenched in Central Asia. Remember, I told you how there is competition, a great game, a geopolitical game in Central Asia between US, Russia, European powers, India, Pakistan, even Iran and Turkey and others. As Central Asia is blessed with resources, right? Many big powers, regional global powers are competing here for influence. So they're all entrenched in Central Asia, trying to protect their interests and access Central Asian resources. Explain that, point out why it is of interest to India. Also mention the disadvantage, the lack of connectivity. We don't have direct connectivity. Now, go on to explain Ashgabat Agreement. How will Ashgabat Agreement help India access Central Asian resources? How will it help to compete with these other powers? How will it help us to overcome the lack of connectivity? Right? That's what you present. You can even bring Chabahar port into this equation. Talk about Chabahar port project and our projects in Afghanistan, which can create alternate route to link with Central Asia. So that is how you build the answer. At the end, of course, you can highlight the risks as well. Even though these projects are being pursued, these connectivity projects, there are risk factors like our ties with Iran has been affected. Afghanistan has been taken over by Taliban, right? Of course, this question came in 2018 when none of this existed. Our ties with Iran was still good. Taliban hadn't taken over. But now, in the current context, we can, of course, mention those points as well in the end, in the way forward. See, there was a question on India Africa as well. If the last few decades were of Asia's growth story, next few are expected to be of Africa's. Did I tell you the destiny, the future of India Africa is tied together? As India becomes one of the fast growing global powers, you will see the rise of African countries as well going forward. Maybe in 30, 40 years, definitely Africa will become very critical. It will witness large scale growth because it will have a very young population. Right now, India is enjoying the demographic dividend, right? Same with all Asian countries. The question is not specific to India, it's specific to Asia. You have to mention all Asian countries have seen tremendous growth from 1990s till now in these 3 decades. But now we are witnessing a slowdown, like China, Japan, Southeast Asia, they're all slowing down. India is continuing to grow, but this will come to an end very soon. We hardly have another 10, 15 years of rapid growth. After that, we'll plateau out. We'll hit a saturation point. And by 2050, we'll start seeing a decline in our growth as well. Right? And our population will be very old as well. We'll start looking at an aging population in 5 to 10 years. So demographic dividend of India is good for some years, and we are utilizing that for our growth. But Africa, with all its resources, will have a positive demographic dividend in the coming decades. So it will witness massive growth. So there is great collaboration opportunity here. If India can collaborate with Africa, we can address the risks and the shortcomings, right, by getting support from Africa. Where India falls short in few decades, we can rely on Africa. Let's say we don't have resources, we can rely on Africa. Let's say we want more manpower. If we have an old aging population, we can rely on African youth to drive our mutual growth. So based on that, discuss our ties with Africa, the broad relations, right? The big investments we have made, the projects we have going on, right? What is our approach towards different parts of Africa? Just mention the regional groupings, saying that we are close to these regional organizations. You can say that Mauritius is a gateway. Through Mauritius, we are pushing our African diplomacy, right? We are bringing the global south together. African Union was brought into G20 by India. India Africa Forum Summit has brought us closer. We have given concessional loans. The Pan African E Network project. Mention all of this, and that essentially completes your answer. All right. Let's take up some other interesting question. Look at this. The US versus China question. The new tri-nation partnership, AUKUS, is aimed at countering China's ambitions in Indo-Pacific. It's going to supersede the existing partnerships in the region? Question mark. Discuss the strength and impact of AUKUS in present scenario. Three questions are there. Three sub questions. First, you have to talk about AUKUS. What is AUKUS? Right? I told you it's a grouping of Australia, UK, US, where UK, US are transferring nuclear submarine technology to Australia. Nuclear submarine technology is being transferred. So clearly, it's a military strategic initiative where US, UK are helping Australia as part of their Indo-Pacific strategy to help Australia to counter China, particularly the Chinese Navy in the Indo-Pacific. So mention that, explain that, what is AUKUS. Then, is it going to supersede the existing partnerships in the region? That's a question. It's asking for your opinion, your stand. What do you think? Can you tell me in the comments? Can you tell me in the comments, will AUKUS supersede the existing partnerships in the region? Yes or no? Very good. Obviously, no. No one grouping can replace all the other existing groupings. Correct? It's common sense. So AUKUS will not be superseding all the existing partnerships. Rather, it's an addition. It will supplement the existing partnerships in the region. It will bring these countries together where Australia will become a more formidable navy with ability to counter the Chinese navy. So what is the impact? What's the strength? What's the impact? The strength is that it will help Australia and Western countries. It will help India as well in an indirect way because Australia is a key partner of the Quad. So as a country with nuclear powered submarines, it can better tackle the Chinese threat, thus protecting stability in Indo-Pacific. That is the strength of AUKUS. It will help India as well indirectly. But the impact is there. There is an impact. This could lead to excessive militarization Since this is clearly a military club being formed where a critical technology is being transferred, it's not ordinary military weapons, it's a nuclear powered submarine, which very few countries have in the world. So, transferring this to Australia will mark an escalation. China will treat this as an escalation, as a military counter to contain China. So, it could increase tensions, trigger an arms race. All right. France is unhappy because Australia was supposed to procure the Scorpion diesel electric submarines like India. India also has procured the Scorpion diesel electric submarines from France. But at the last minute, Australia cancelled the deal and instead went for nuclear powered submarines from UK and US. So Australia France relations, Western countries France relations have been affected because of the cancellation of the deal. So there is a division that has come up within the Western world. Plus, it could instigate China, triggering arms race, creating more tensions and militarization of the Indo-Pacific. That is the negative impact. So if you can bring out these different aspects, that's it. Your answer is done. So there's no way why you'll not get good marks. So like this, we have had questions on SARC, all right? Questions on BIMSTEC. That's why I told you regional groups are very important. That's why I haven't left any important regional grouping. We have covered all the important ones in which India is a part of. So we had questions on Sri Lanka, entire questions on Maldives, a question on Gujarat doctrine. It's a static topic. As I told you, today it's not too relevant. There are some provisions of the Gujarat doctrine, but it will not be repeated. Don't worry. That's why I said don't cover this. It's an old topic. It's already been asked. So just know what it is. Under IK Gujarat, who was a prime minister and foreign minister as well, this doctrine was brought out, which is based on 5 principles. It adopted a new approach for India's ties with neighborhood countries. Because in 1990s, India was, treated with doubt and suspicion by the neighboring countries. We had a problematic relationship with all the neighbors. We have studied that. In 90s, our ties with Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, all of them was affected in some way or the other. So to create a positive image, to correct the big brother image we had, we started out a new initiative in our foreign policy based on Gujarat doctrine. Some principles were good, they remain relevant even today, like helping our neighbors without expecting anything in return, settling disputes through talks and negotiations, right? Respecting others' integrity, sovereignty. They're all relevant provisions. But some provisions, like not allowing our soil to be used against other countries, then not interfering in the internal matters of other countries. These are not too relevant because by following them, our intelligence abilities were affected. RAW's covert operations were shut down under Gujarat doctrine, which affected our intelligence gathering abilities because we had promised to not interfere and to not use our soil to target other countries. Now, in geopolitics, you can't do that. Intelligence operations are critical. So, experts say that this was a drawback. This was the negative impact of Gujarat doctrine, where our intelligence abilities were affected because of this reduced operations, covert operations of RAW. So, that was the relevance. All right, some were relevant, some were not. But again, don't worry, it will not come again. Just know what it is, what it dealt with. That's more than enough. See, a question on string of pearls. Very simple, actually. What do you understand by string of pearls? How does it impact India? Briefly outline steps taken by India to counter this. This is what we studied under India China in detail. Next, a question on terrorism and India Pakistan, which we studied again in detail. Right? Terrorist activities and mutual distrust have clouded India Pak relations. To what extent the use of soft power like sports cultural exchanges could help generate goodwill between two countries? Discuss with suitable examples. Whenever tensions have gone up, in the past, India Pakistan have used soft power diplomacy to make some outreach to each other, to bring some normalcy back into the relationship. Like you might remember the test match series back in 90s between India and Pakistan, where the Pakistani leader Parvez Musharraf was invited by Prime Minister Vajpayee, and it was cricket diplomacy, right? In the name of cricket, when the whole attention of the media, the country was on the cricket match, the leaders got together and they had a fruitful discussion. Vajpayee and Musharraf had a good discussion on various issues, which otherwise could not have happened because of the tensions in the relationship. This was used before as well, even by Rajiv Gandhi. Cricket diplomacy has been there since then. in 1980s as well. Then recently during 2011 World Cup, the India-Pakistan semi-final at Mohali, right? Prime Minister Manmohan Singh grabbed the opportunity because after Mumbai attacks after 2008, the Manmohan Singh government never got an opportunity to engage with Pakistan. There was tremendous public media pressure, opposition pressure. So the option was never there to talk to Pakistan. The first opening happened in 2011 when the India-Pakistan semi-finals happened. It came as a blessing for India, right? There were issues we wanted to discuss. So India latched onto the opportunity, and Manmohan Singh invited Gilani, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, to watch the match with him. That is just an excuse. That is just a platform, right? Because everyone's attention is on the match. No one cares about the politics then. When the India-Pakistan match is going on, right? The whole media public attention is entirely on the cricket match itself. So that gives a perfect opportunity for leaders to meet, discuss, and bring some normalcy into the relationship. So definitely soft power can play a role. These are the examples you need to quote. Cricket diplomacy under Rajiv Gandhi, Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh. All right. Cultural exchanges. The various artists of India, Pakistan. Right. You can mention popular Bollywood actors who have worked in India. Mention popular singers as well. Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Right. All legends. Amazing in their art. Who have contributed to art and culture between both the countries. Right. Pakistani music is and actors are as popular in India as they are in Pakistan, and same with Indian music and movies as well, widely popular in Pakistan. So off late there is a very negative sentiment that extremists have built around it. Unfortunately, political parties also have exploited this, targeting Pakistani actors and Pakistani musicians, right? But cultural ties will always play a great role in rebuilding your ties. We have used this in the past successfully under various governments to leverage soft power to try and bring normalcy in the relationship. As much as you hate Pakistan, you can't ignore the country. A country with nuclear weapons, a country with whom you have a dispute, a country which is sponsoring terrorism. You can't simply cut off all your ties and sit idly away from the country, from Pakistan. You need some engagement. You need to have ties, contact with them to prevent even worse situations from happening, right? So point out all these aspects. That's exactly what the question is asking. Have we used it before? Are there examples? How does it help in bringing goodwill? So talk about that and explain how soft power can play a role. All right. So these were some of the questions I wanted to show you, both prelims and mains questions. I hope now you have a good idea, a fair idea as to what kind of questions to expect in your exams. Now we still have some time. I can look at some questions or we can end the session as well. But I would say let's look at some questions. If you still have doubts, do let me know. Vedashri is asking, sir, Russia is talking about de-ratification of the CTBT, Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. What is the impact of this, sir? Please watch my Hindu analysis from yesterday. I have covered this topic just yesterday, right? I've explained the background of CTBT. We have studied what is NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. I mentioned what is CTBT, but I've given you more background in the Hindu analysis yesterday. So please watch it. So it bans all forms of nuclear testing for all military civilian purposes, right? It was brought out in 1996 by UN General Assembly, but it is not in force because the major nuclear weapon states, they have not ratified it. Like US and China, they have not ratified it even though they have signed it. India, Pakistan, North Korea, they have not signed at all because these are discriminatory treaties. We can't give up testing when other countries can have nuclear weapons. But despite it not coming into force, it is still effective in preventing testing. There is a moratorium around the world on testing. Every country has put a temporary halt except North Korea. Every country has put a halt on nuclear testing since 1998. Right after 98, no country has tested nuclear weapons except for North Korea. So in that regard, CTBT is a success even without coming into force. Russia has signed and ratified it. But now it's being said it's looking to revoke the ratification because of its rivalry with Western countries over Ukraine war. Russia is using the nuclear angle to blackmail them, to threaten them. All right. So Russia has pushed a bill It's considering a bill in its parliament, in the Duma, to revoke its ratification so that Russia is no longer obligated under the treaty, meaning it's opening up itself for possible testing. It doesn't mean Russia is going to test. It may. It is just keeping that option open. Now, this could trigger the Western countries, right? Now, USA, which is also not ratified, might escalate considering its own nuclear testing, which might trigger a nuclear arms race again, as we saw during Cold War. And this could create a vicious cycle. Now, if Russia revokes ratification, US will also, end its moratorium on testing. If one of them were to escalate tensions, either of them can go ahead and conduct a nuclear test. And that is something which will change the very course of geopolitics of the world. If either one of them conducts a nuclear test again, the other country will respond. They will also conduct their tests. They'll start scaling up their program. And if US Russia do this, the other powers will do the same, starting with China. Why? China will feel threatened by US conducting a nuclear test. Maybe imagine a hypothetical scenario where Russia will conduct the first test, US will counter this, even UK, France, which feel threatened by Russia's tests, they may conduct their own testing. US will do this, which will threaten China. If China does this, it will threaten India. India will go ahead do a test. It will threaten Pakistan in return. Pakistan will do its test. And North Korea will be the only one which is happy. Kim Jong-un would be extremely happy with this, right? As he has a fascination for launching rockets, missiles, and testing nuclear weapons. So it creates a vicious cycle. That's what you call an arms race, right? A competition for acquiring more arms. So that is the risk we are running if Russia quits, if it revokes the ratification of CTBT. Tomorrow is a holiday. Yes, we have announced this. Again, I'm telling you, tomorrow we don't have a class on the account of the Dasra festival, right? So we'll not have any classes. Please remember that. Surya is asking, sir, please take my doubt. Okay, definitely I'll take your doubt. Let me see where your question is. Surya is asking, sir, why doesn't India follow reverse salami slicing technique as China has deliberately refused to abide our sovereignty and recognize McMahon line? See, if India gets aggressive against China, you should be ready for the consequences. Now imagine, let's say there are two brothers, all right, a big brother, a small brother. The big brother is well built, very strong. Small brother is very frail, weak, and a very small kid. If the two were to fight, who will get the bigger hit? Obviously, the smaller one. You have to realize and acknowledge this reality in geopolitics as well. And India knows this. I'm not undermining India. India is definitely a formidable economic power. We are a formidable military power as well. But when it comes to China, relatively, in our comparison, China is a far superior economic military power. If you try to provoke China, trigger China deliberately, China is going to retaliate. Definitely, it will retaliate. It will step up border tensions. It might even capture a part of your territory. It will not even hesitate to go to war if required. Now, the point is, are we ready for the consequences? It might scale up the covert war in Northeast India. It might revive insurgency. China can easily do it if it wants to, right? It can give even more support to Pakistan to create more tensions in Kashmir. So there are multiple points where China can, push India. So can you withstand that? If you go for salami slicing technique, as you're saying, which means we should also, carry out incursions, annex some Chinese territory. If you try doing that, China is going to retaliate. And the question is, are you ready for that? And honestly, India is not. The government knows that very well. That is why whenever there is an escalation, we are seeking a settlement. We are not seeking to escalate. We are countering, we are defending ourselves. We are very proactively defending ourselves, but ensuring that we settle, we talk. Diplomacy is the option for India, not escalation. Prasad is asking, sir, all terrorist organizations active near Afghanistan-Pakistan border, are they the largest threat to India? Definitely. All the terror groups operating in Afghanistan-Pakistan belt represent one of the biggest security threats to India. Be it Taliban, Haqqani Network, Al-Qaeda, ISIS in the Khorasan province, Islamic State in Khorasan province, even the TTP, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, right? Then you have Lashkar-e Jhangvi, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen. Multiple terror groups operate here. All of them represent a threat to India because any form of terrorism is not good for India. Devasmita is asking, when smaller nations don't have much military power, what's the advantage of having military exercises with them? See, small countries may not have much military power, but by conducting exercises with them, you're assuring them in a way that, okay, we are there to stand with you if required. And you're also sharing your practices, you're building interoperability. If ever in the future you want to operate together, be it a military mission, be it a combat mission, or a disaster management mission, since you have worked before, there is a certain bond, a trust between the forces. uh, and also you understand their weapons, their platforms, you understand their strategies, how they operate, right? That common understanding is important between friendly countries to work together, to operate together if required in the future. Also, it will help deter the rivals. If two friendly countries, doesn't matter a small country or big country, they work together, conduct these exercises, it's an automatic deterrent to the rival countries, right? So that's why military exercises are very important, even with small nations. Shubhangi is asking, sir, does Indian government have any authority over the region that is occupied by China and Pakistan? No, on the ground we have no control, no authority at all. Aksai Chin is fully with China, POK is fully with Pakistan. Of course, we claim both the territories as part of India, but on the ground, if you're asking, do we have control on the ground? No, not at all. China has fully occupied Aksai Chin and Pakistan has fully occupied POK. So we have no administrative control as such in these occupied territories. Pravasini is asking, sir, my doubts are pending. Please solve them. Okay. There are a flood of questions here. See, that is why we asked you to send your doubts before. If you had sent your doubts before, we could have sorted it. I would have picked all the questions one by one. The problem is very few of you have sent questions. That is very unfortunate. And now you're asking in the comments. The problem is the comments keep scrolling up, right? And every time it's not possible practically to look at all the questions. Let's see where the question is hiding. I'm trying to find it out. I'll try my best, but don't mind if I can't find this because there are hundreds of questions right now. Pravasini, if possible, please ask your question again so that it will come at the start and I can definitely take it up. Shreyansh is asking why China left Arunachal in 62 and again asking for it now. See, China's intention was never to occupy Arunachal Pradesh. When it went to war in 62, I told you, right? China had two objectives. One, capture Aksai Chin. It was critical to link Tibet with Xinjiang to build that road. Second, to punish India, to push India back, which was acting aggressively. So China's intention over Arunachal Pradesh is just to pressurize India, not to occupy, capture Arunachal Pradesh. Even today, meddling in Arunachal, calling it South Tibet, is just a pressure tactic. It's part of the five-finger policy of Mao Zedong, which I explained. Neha is asking how permanent seat concept veto power ensures fair decisions globally. It does not. That's what I explained in UN reforms. Having permanent seat for only 5 countries and giving them veto power will not ensure fair decisions because they're all using veto power, their permanent seat, to protect their own interests. They're not interested about global stability. They're not interested about the true goals and objectives of the UN, right? All the P5 countries, China, Russia, US, UK, France, they've all used their veto, their permanent seat for their own geopolitical interests. That is why we say UN has become unfair, right? With Kashmir issue, for example, we didn't get a fair solution, right? Prime Minister Nehru expected a fair solution. We placed our faith in the UN. It was a new institution. That's why we took Kashmir issue to the UN. But then we were betrayed. We realized that UN is not fair because these countries, UK, US especially, were backing Pakistan, aligning with Pakistan. So this has happened with every conflict, with every country. That's why UN reforms are needed. Pravasini is asking how American relations with Qatar helped to release two American hostages from Hamas. See, I've explained before as well, Qatar has very good ties with many terrorist organizations. Be it Taliban, we discussed that under Afghanistan, how Qatar mediated between US and Taliban to strike the US Taliban deal. Hamas has sponsored Muslim Brotherhood. It has ties with Hamas. Hamas is a branch of Muslim Brotherhood. It's an offshoot. Qatar has ties with Hezbollah as well, right? It has ties with Al Qaeda. So Qatar is, even though it's a small country, it has these ties with many radical terror groups. That's why it was boycotted from the Gulf Cooperation Council. As Saudi Arabia, UAE were threatened, the Sunni interests were being threatened by Qatar. It was boycotted from the GCC. That's why the diplomatic blockade was imposed, which we were discussing. So right now, Qatar has ties with Hamas. US has good ties with Qatar. So obviously, Qatar has mediated as American hostages were being held. And with Qatar's mediation, two hostages have been released as a goodwill gesture. Shreyank is asking, sir, I've sent my question. Why doesn't India aggressively push UN reforms? We are aggressively pushing UN reforms. From 25, 30 years, we are aggressively pushing UN reforms. Every time UN GA summit happens, every time we meet with US, Russia, or even UK and France, right? We keep pushing UN reforms aggressively. Be it at G20, even at G20, we repeated the same position of India. The G4 countries, India with Brazil, then Germany and Japan, they're constantly pushing for UN reforms. Kostov is asking, sir, a lot of aspects pertaining to countries, their relations are covert and unofficial, which may be controversial as well. Can we write these things in exam? Could you share an approach to writing answers in this regard? See, the covert aspects, the unofficial aspects, or reported alleged statements, you can't write that in the exam. That is only for your broader understanding. In the world of international relations, if you ask me, do countries engage in covert operations? Definitely yes. Any power which is looking to protect its interests, they will not only act officially in the public domain, they will act covertly as well through their intelligence agencies. All right. But that is something you can't talk about in the exam because it will be controversial, it will be unverified. It could be as good as rumors or it could be true as well, but we are in no position to verify. Now, if you ask me, did Raw kill Niger? We don't know. No one can answer this, right? Without any clear evidence coming in the public domain. So don't get into those details. In class, we discuss them. We have to for your broader understanding, right? Even if you have to mention, let's say some controversial topic has to be mentioned, which is unofficial or covert, right? Which is an allegation. Make sure it is not your opinion. Let's say you want to talk about India's interference in Nepal, how India has meddled with Nepal's politics. Let's say the question is asking for it. Say that Nepal's political parties have alleged India is interfering in their country. Based on that, anti-India sentiments were promoted. Now it's not your opinion. You're simply telling what Nepal's parties were saying. So it's about how you write the answer. That is the approach you have to take. Try and avoid it as much as possible. Now don't write India sponsored LTT. It is not excused. It's not tolerable. You can say Sri Lanka alleged that India was sponsoring LTT. Then it's not your statement, it's Sri Lanka's statement, right? That's how you can present it, or you can avoid it. If it is really needed, present it in this way. Make it a third party opinion, not your opinion. All right. So, guys, these were the questions that I could see. Of course, there are few more, but again, as I told you, you should have sent it before it. We could have made it more structured. Now, the problem is there are many questions which have gone in the comment section, and I can't really retrieve all of them. But anyways, I've tried answering as many as possible. We got a good 3 hours plus. If you still have doubts, reach out to us. Drop a mail. We'll see. If especially, I'll try to see if I can reply to them. I hope you guys have liked these sessions, right? Don't worry, we'll meet again. We'll have other subjects, right? We'll have other sessions. So you'll get many more opportunities to discuss this. So do let me know how the class went. You'll get a feedback form. Do fill it up. I hope you really have enjoyed the classes, because once you enjoy the classes, you'll learn, right? You'll remember, and it basically helps you in your exam. That's the whole purpose. So do let me know how the classes went. Happy Dasara to all of you. I'll see you next time. Till then, take care. Have a good day and all the very best.